Hello, and welcome to this episode where we will be talking about the year 2010 and what that brought to video games. So, we're entering into a new decade and still kind of in the middle of a little bit past the middle of the seventh generation. So, there was still some good stuff coming out, specifically more, I would say, on the PlayStation 3. But before we get into all that, we'll do our regular roulette of gaming, where I already have some 3 games selected here that we will discuss, and then also touch base on some modern gaming news. And then after that, that's where we'll get into the meat of 2010. Hopefully, everyone's been having a great week. We're rolling right along into springtime, it seems like, and it's been a busy week for work to an extent. But other than that, nothing else major going on as far as my own personal stuff. So hopefully, at the very least, right, you've had a lot of goodwill and fortune come your way, and nothing too crazy, right? With at least within your personal life, I know that there's a lot of things going on right now in the world that for many of us, it's out of our control. So take care of yourselves, take care of those around you. Try to find a way to unplug sometimes. Although if you are listening to this, I do appreciate it, as I know sometimes it can get a little much with what's going on out there. But here's again, for at least for within your own personal world, right, and all that, you're having some peace and fortune as much as possible. But I did want to make a little announcement today, as I with my channel Arcade Amigo on YouTube, I'm not really sure what exactly I was doing with it. I was trying to find some kind of like a consistent schedule of some sort, and so far the main things that I've been able to do are like this podcast, which I upload every Sunday, and then my YouTube shorts. I've been trying to do that every day. But other than that, I have like actually a lot of plans of stuff that I want to do. And honestly, I mean, a lot of the things that I've been doing, it's just kind of sort of for myself in a way, where I just want to archive some things. I never really knew if this is going to go anywhere or not. But I've been able to finally find out a way of how to like record actual gameplay, where I'm not just pointing the camera at the TV and then do my commentary or voiceover and then upload that to YouTube. So it looks a lot more professional now. So I've started doing some of that in a Let's Play series, and so my goal with that there is that I'll be able to do that, like the full game, for some games that I really wanted to have archived somehow, and outside of just me having owning the game to some extent. Um, but I don't know how consistent that's going to be. It's again just with my overall schedule, I'm a bit limited, and also because as of right now, I've only figured out how to do that on the PlayStation 5, because it has a Share Factory app on there, which makes it fairly easy, right, to do all that. I did buy a capture card a little while ago, and I just haven't really sat down and taken the time to try to figure out how to use all that. And so basically anything that I do try to upload will be games that I have access to on my PlayStation 5. But as of right now, it just goes to testing it out, right? See how it all worked. And so on one of the, I guess you can say, episodes that I uploaded was for Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And that one, my voice came out a bit muffled. And unfortunately, the way I recorded, I'm not able to really fix it as far as I can see. So yeah, not the most professional and all, but then my next ones did get better. So, but I got for Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Metal Gear Solid. So those will be the first 2 games that I'll be slowly uploading on there. But maybe I can get some more clips on there for within before the end of the week or so. And that's the plan anyways. And so eventually I'm starting off with probably like 5th generation games, and I'll just slowly work my way up a bit. So we'll see how that all goes, but at the very least I would say, if you kind of look at it like sort of like a casual playthrough, I know a thing or two about the games that I'm going to be uploading, so I'll probably provide a bit of like tips and hints on how to get past certain areas, but nothing too professional or anything, right? I'm not, like I said, a professional gamer. They're just games that I have some experience with, and but mainly kind of more like a story casual playthrough. And that's sort of the goal with it. Is again, I just want to sort of archive up on YouTube, right, some of my favorite games of all time. But that's that there. And so if you have been listening or anything, I truly appreciate it. Like I said, I'm not really sure where I'm going with all this here and all, and but at the very least, it's been very therapeutic and very fun for me to do. So hopefully, it's at least providing some kind of a distraction for you, or also keeping you informed on some things to some extent. Obviously, I'm a little late with the news, when it comes to modern gaming stuff. So again, just to kind of reiterate, What I do here is for like especially when I'm touching base on the modern gaming new stuff, is that it's not so much like I'm trying to keep up to date to the minute, right, and all on everything, or have all kinds of information on it. It's just more of a casual conversation about headlines that I read and all. And some of the articles I do a little bit of a deep dive into, but depends on just how much time I have throughout the week. And then I just sort of relay that information as best as I can, when I upload it on Sunday. But let's get into here for Role of Gaming, though, for the games that I had picked here. And so, as usual, got a variety of different games here, starting with the first one, and that is for Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. So this game is a fairly recent game. I believe it came out, was it at the end of 2024, 23, or 24? I want to say 24, right? And so this game actually was gifted to me. And I had heard about it, that it was getting some decent reviews and all. And so my wife was kind enough to, I think it was on the Christmas of 2024, or whenever the game came out, right? And all, it was at Christmas. And so I've been able to play it some. And I got to say that Avatar is kind of a weird movie, right? Where it's been highly successful. I mean, there are two, Avatar and Avatar Way of the Water, I believe the second one's called. I mean, they've been, Avatar has been the most successful movie of all time as far as, sales goes and all, or at least overall profit, I guess. And then Way of the Water is right up there as well. And so, I mean, they're obviously very successful movies, but they're movies that you don't really see a whole lot of like mention of past that. Sure, people may talk about the imagery of the movies, which they are admittedly really gorgeous movies, but past that, nothing much else, though, right? I mean, you don't really see like really any cultural relevance to them. You don't really see them in discussions or even memes or anything about it. It's just not something you see much of. So it's kind of interesting, right? It's almost like a phenomenon on how that is. But regardless, though, the imagery of the movies are really stunning. The whole setting and everything that James Cameron created, it's something truly special. And I actually like the movies. I don't hold them in the highest regard, but I definitely think that they're fun action adventure movies, I guess you can say. And again, the imagery is really beautiful, right? So it definitely lures you into this world. And so with this Avatar Frontiers of Pandora game, so this game came out on the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. And it's basically like it's set in the same universe and even has like mentions of events from the movies and all, but it's sort of its own story, though. And when it first came out, it's like a first person, I don't want to say completely like a shooter, but kind of like a first person immersive, almost like an immersive sim to an extent game. And the graphics on it are truly stunning. I mean, they really brought Pandora to life in this one, and definitely mimics a lot of what the movie was able to do, right, with its imagery and all. So it's pretty stunning to look at. The gameplay itself, I mean, it's a first person action adventure game, and I mean, it's pretty cool. It's definitely feels like a Ubisoft game where you have a lot of things to clear on the map and all. But I know that formula can get tiring for a lot of people, as things can seem a little bloated and all. But for me, I didn't mind it when I was playing it, just because I'm not. I've said it before and all that I kind of lost track of a lot of Ubisoft games after like around the mid 2010s or so. So I guess I haven't been burnt out on that formula completely. But what I played of it, it definitely seems cool. And a game that I'm really interested in getting into. I got a little ways into it, but then I got stuck at one point. And I have this bad habit where I just almost have like, and I don't mean to say this as sort of like for anybody that truly suffers from it, but like ADHD when it comes to video games. I'm like, I jump from one to the next, almost like a Looney Tune, like woohoo, woo, shiny new game, woohoo, woo, new game, or even not a new game, just necessarily just another game, which is kind of the problem of just having like a whole bunch of like access to games that we do nowadays, where I just kind of jump all over the place from one game to the other. So part of the reason that I've been doing my Let's Plays is sort of that it helps me focus on just one game, right? Or one game or two at the most, right? But anyway, but from what I've played of that game, though, it seems interesting, and I'm curious to play it, especially now that my understanding is that it got a patch where you can play the game now in third person, and it changes up the game some on that. So I'm curious about that too. And then, although I got it on the PlayStation 5, and I know that with the PlayStation 5 Pro, there was a patch that came out for it to supposedly better the graphics, but then it was kind of broken, so they went back. So I don't know. But either way, though, I mean, when I played it, it was still on the base PS5, and it looked pretty stunning there, right? So, and I believe actually now it's on Game Pass for anyone that has that and wants to check it out there. But either way, though, I think it's a cool game. I would say that if you're a fan of the movie, it's definitely worth checking out. But the next game, though, is for Heart of Darkness. And so this game is a relatively unknown now PlayStation 1 game that came out fairly early in its lifetime. I want to say, I think if it didn't come out in 1995, I would say 1996, maybe 1997. I don't know, somewhere around there. But what it is, it's very much in line with games like, well, on the PlayStation itself, like the Abe's Odyssey games, or like even something like Outworld or Prince of Persia, or even to an extent Flashback. And what I mean by that is what these games that were being dubbed back then as cinematic platformers, where they're platforming games, but they're also heavy on puzzles. And so there's not so much to, or a whole lot of action to them. It's just more like you're figuring out how to get past certain obstacles right in each stage. So kind of look at it like almost like a modern day or like a retro like games like Limbo or Inside, where again they're platforming games and all, but a lot of it is trying to solve puzzles and all. A lot of times you have like a one-hit death, and also they can be a bit of trial and error games, as much as my understanding of it. But it was using like these CG graphics where starting to become the norm back then for any like 2D style games that were coming up back then. But it has a very interesting aesthetic where it's sort of like kind of like some of the Pixar movies that were coming out back then, right? Where it's kind of cartoony like and all, but not like with hand drawn cartoons, but more with like CGI animation. And so my understanding is, so you play this boy, and I think there's a dog involved. I'm not sure, but you go into this other world, I believe, and there's like these shadow creatures or demons that are after you. Honestly, that's probably a very bad synopsis of the game, but that's a little bit that I understand. I know I've played it before. I remember the game well. It's just I never really actually played it fully. I know I played it before, but I think I want to say like maybe through a demo disc or something like that, and I never gave it a whole lot of time. But it definitely seems interesting and something that, if I had all the world in the time or the time in the world to play, I'm sure it'd be one that I wouldn't mind scratching off the backlog at some point, or at least giving it a good chance. So at least when I put up a YouTube short of this, and all, it'll give me a little bit of more of a taste of what this game's all about. But I believe it was developed or published by Interplay. Was it? Actually, I don't know. I forgot. I'll leave it at that. Like I said, I don't know a whole lot about it. I just know that it was getting decent reviews back then, and seemed like a fun little sort of like again one of those cinematic platformers that I would say that if you're interested in games like Abe's Odyssey, or more recently Limbo, Inside, those kind of games, then this is maybe one that might spark your interest as well too. So again, came out on the original Sony PlayStation back in the day. And last but not least on this segment here for Rolling of Gaming is Rambo 3. So Rambo 3, I have a lot of nostalgia for. So Rambo 3, so there was a few different Rambo games that came out, right, especially back in the day. But this particular one is on the Sega Genesis. So Rambo 3, I think it might have been a launch title, or if not, it came out really early in the Sega Genesis lifetime, so that would have been around 1989. And it's a top-down shooter that follows, loosely the events of the Rambo 3 movie, which, those movies were pretty popular back then. And so you have your machine gun that you can use. You also have your knife, which you can stab enemies, and if you do that, you'll get more items, which basically are for bow and arrows or attacks, which, the explosive bow and arrows, I should say, or the time bombs as well, too, that you can use throughout the level, right, to blow up certain things. And so the game is not incredibly long. I think it's only like, 6 stages or so. I used to beat this game a lot back in the day, but it's been a while. And so again, like in the first stage, and each stage is fairly short. I mean, there's some of them that have a bit of that are actually kind of like mazes, so those can actually take a little bit. But then there's just more straight action stages, right, and all where you're just kind of going through and taking out some enemy bases or military vehicles and whatnot. And so it's a lot of, I think it's pretty fun. It's a game that I think that was somewhat popular, I guess, back then, just because of the limited games that were out on the Genesis, during its launch window. But then it just sort of got forgotten. But I always feel like it's a pretty decent top-down shooter. that's a licensed game, right, from the Rambo properties. And then at the end of most stages, I believe, I don't know if it's all of them, but most stages, you'll take on like kind of like an over the shoulder perspective where you're moving left or right, and you hold down the button to shoot your bow and arrow. Let me explosive bow and arrow, but you're taking on like either a tank or a helicopter or two. And so those segments, they're kind of fun. And the graphics, I remember, were pretty impressive during those segments there, as the way everything scrolls and just the more detailed character sprites and whatnot. And I remember seeing those in the screenshots and thought it looked amazing, right? Almost like photorealistic back then. But it's a cool little shooter. Like I said, it's not going to take up too much of your time. So I would say if you're into like retro top-down shooters, I'd give this one a chance. And especially if you're a fan of the Rambo movies, like I was back in the day, it's a fun little nostalgic trip, right? And all, even if you've never played the games. And like I said, I hold a lot of nostalgic memory for this, just because it was when we got to Sega Genesis, so we had Altered Beast, obviously, right? And I want to say, I think this is the second game that we got. And so, back in the day, right, you played the shit out of whatever games that you had because you didn't get a whole lot. And yeah, so that's why I just played this game over and over and over and over. But I will say that surprisingly, it also has some really decent music too. Um, Sega Genesis games earlier on in its lifetime, so I noticed this, that some of the games just had like actually not that bad of music. It wasn't until later when that Gems audio program or whatever it was called was introduced that it just kind of lowered the quality of Sega Genesis music. But yeah, surprisingly, there's some songs in this that I remember still are stuck in my head. Uh, and yeah, just a game I played the shit out of back in the day, and so I'm actually kind of excited to touch base on this game a little bit while I'm doing my little YouTube shorts on it. But that's what I got here for the Rolly of Gaming segment. So let's jump over to modern gaming stuff. So like usual, there was a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of news, and so I made some quick notes on some of these things. Again, I'm not going to be fully invested in some of these stories, but I wanted to touch base on some of them as much as I understand it. So let's kind of get going here. So Nintendo did have a show. It was an indie showcase, and I didn't really watch it, so I don't know really anything that came out. But from my hope was that I was like, oh, what if they show off like Clair Obscur, because it is considered like an indie game, right? And so I was like, well, maybe they'll show it off here. But as far as I know, I don't think they did. I didn't really see anything that was like being talked about a lot from this show, so I don't think there was any like major release. Indie showcases generally tend to be a little bit more um, low key, I guess, and all. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on there and all for people, like a lot of those kind of games. And I mean, there's always a lot of great stuff coming out in the indie scene and all, but there's also like a lot of games that are like kind of more cozy games and things like that, which, I know that they definitely have an audience. So if you're like into those kind of games, then definitely check out the showcase if you haven't already. It came out on on the 3rd of March, so a little while back now. But because it seemed like it was kind of, as far as I can tell, like a little bit that I did see of it, and all seemed to have a lot of those kind of games. But the main thing that I saw that people seemed to be excited for that came out from the showcase was the puzzle game Blueprints that came out last year, I believe. And I've been curious about this game. It seems like it was a really well regarded puzzle game of some sort, and so it's coming out on the Switch too. So there you go. But High Guard, so that live action game that came out, oh geez, what, like earlier, like not even a little over a month ago, I believe. So they made an announcement that it's permanently shutting down on the 12th of March. I mean, already that certainly didn't take long. And I don't know enough about the industry enough for me to really speculate on a lot of things. I'm just kind of going off of what other people are saying, but I can't imagine that's good, right? Obviously, you can come out with a game. I'm sure it costs some money, right, to get it going. And so, Mike, I guess when I see stuff like this, it's just kind of frustrating where you're there's a lot of talent out there, right, as far as like developers and all. But it just seems like it seems to me in my eyes, right, and just from things that I've seen, is that the mismanagement of what's going on with a lot of these corporations and everything, and just basically playing with people's lives. I mean, you got these developers and all that. I mean, I can't imagine like if they're permanently shutting down. I'm assuming that a lot of these developers are now going to be unemployed because they're shutting it down on the 12th of March. So here, as of the recording of this, in about 6 days. So I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine that that's good for them. And I mean, the whole trend of trying to chase these live service games, and I guess I don't get it. I don't get, I guess, to what is the just what is a I mean, I guess what am I talking about? I understand why a lot of these companies are getting just because they're so lucrative, right? And all when they do hit right, but is the risk really that worth it? Because so many of these flop now. But well, regardless, right? Like I said, I haven't done too much of a deep dive on the story, so I'll just leave it at that. But hopefully the developers can find some kind of work, assuming that they're unemployed, are going to be unemployed here soon. And I mean, there might be some that are still left over, right, trying to maintain the game to some extent. But as far as I know, it's a completely permanently shutting it down. So yeah, just another corpse in the live service graveyard there. But I don't know. The industry's in a weird place now and all. And every time I see a story like this, I was like, are we not learning our lesson yet? But here we are, though, right?
Hopping over to another kind of story, though. So this is a story that I'm not fully caught up on, and looks like there was a bit of an update too also throughout the week. So I'll just go over here what I understand of it. But so I've talked a bit before on emulation and all, and how that's important to preserve video games. And I mean, honestly, at a lot of the games that I played that are, I guess, a bit on the older side and all tend to be through some form of emulation, just because a lot of these games have just been lost to time. I do try to buy games as much as possible, right as they're available, if it's something that I'm interested in. But if it's not available, like through a convenient retail mean, then, I feel that emulation is the way to go, just because so many of these games are being just lost to time. And so how you get game. So if you're not familiar with emulation at all, right? So basically there's an emulator that you can get. It's a software, so to speak, right? And you can get either on your PC or Android devices or Linux and all. And so there's several of them out there. So like, for example, like one system can have multiple emulators out there. Some work better than others. And but basically the emulation itself is legal. But how do you get the games, right? That's usually the question that if nobody's ever familiar with ROMs, and I was like, well, okay, cool. I got the thing all set up on my computer, my phone or whatever. How do I get games though? And that's where it gets kind of a gray area, right? There's been several sites though where you can get games. I guess I'll leave it at that. And some of them have been more legit than others. But this site I wasn't familiar with, actually. It's called Miriant. And so I just saw this pop up in the headlines this past week. And so it said that, excuse me, so Miriant is an amazing video game preservation site. And apparently, though, it'll be shutting down at the end of March due to rising costs due to RAM shortages caused by AI. The same shortages affecting the Steam machine and, the possible other, like computer components and whatnot. So Miriant was an amazing archive of some of the rarest and hard to find games known to exist, but looks like it's going to go away here soon. And so, retro gaming has been making a comeback, but stuff like this, though, definitely makes it more difficult, though, to get into it, right? Because again, retro gaming are just so expensive also, I mean, you think like a regular gaming is expensive. If you're trying to get like the actual physical copies of a retro game, it's even more expensive. But that was a story that originally broke out. And like I said, I wasn't even familiar with this site. And so, but either way though, right? I mean, it seems like, just kind of reading some comments and all, it seems like a lot of people would use this site to get a lot of not only fine games, but also some very rare ones as well too. I mean, it said something like that they had 390 terabytes of games, right? So that's a huge chunk there. But I don't know to the full extent of this second part of this story though, but I saw something that somehow it's being saved though now. So, because again, I saw it earlier the week, right, that it's being shut down, but then something that it's being saved. So I don't know if people came in to crowdfund it and to try to save it, or I'm not sure to the full extent of that. So I'll need to do a little bit more deep diving on that. It was just another headline that I saw real quick before I started recording this. But yeah, just FYI right on that. And that's, it's, well, we've talked about this before, right? I know, but it's just like, how do you save video games? How do you save all these ROMs and all where, for example, like movies, it's a bit more easier, where video games, it's more complex because these games are tied to certain hardwares, right? And as these hardwares have aged and all, and then each one has certain complexities to it and how they were developed, just for example, the Sega Saturn, right? But, or, also the issues that, it hasn't really been publicly stated, but what we could assume are the issues that Sony has had was trying to get PlayStation 3 games up and going on the PlayStation 5 for like backwards compatible. You can stream them on there, but to play them natively, as of right now, they haven't really been able to do it. I think they got one out there, but it's kind of like a smaller scale game. So, the emulation presents certain challenges, right? And but there's definitely been a lot of cool people out there that have been trying to keep it alive and made it in many different ways, right? Again, with making emulators for a lot of these systems that we've enjoyed in the past, and then hosting these ROMs on there so that people can download them. But it's usually either under attack from the legalities of it, right, with some of the bigger companies, specifically Nintendo going after them, but then also, stuff like this, right, apparently with the RAM shortages, which is, well, that's just causing issues all the way around. But hopefully I'm going to try to do a little bit more deep dive on that for how exactly, I guess, it's being saved. But I would say that if you are someone getting into emulation, then this would be like the time to jump on it now, right? To check out this website. So again, it's Myrient. It's Myrient. So I'm sure if you Google that and games or ROMs and all, you'll come across the website for them. And because, apparently it was a pretty popular place to go to for that. But yeah, hopefully it continues to get saved. But speaking on the emulation side, though, so this is another thing that I just came across too as well. So there's been so when it comes to emulation, right? So I'll just say this: if you're trying to get into it, maybe I should do some kind of emulation video. I don't know, but basically, if you have a decent enough hardware, you can pretty much emulate up to the Nintendo Switch mostly really well. There's some games that don't quite emulate, across the, that well and all, but for the most part, right now, you can emulate up to the Nintendo Switch pretty well. Again, if you have a powerful enough device. So let's just say, like if we're taking something like the Odin 2 or the ROG Ally X, right? So let's just say you wanted you want the top of the line, right? And now you're going to get one device to kind of be your end all for emulation. Let's just say you get the ROG Ally X, right? Which is pretty, as far as I understand, probably the most powerful PC handheld out there, right? There might be some other ones now and all, but it's still considered to be one of the more powerful ones, and I guess the more mainstreamish one, right? Because there's like the Steam Deck and all, right, but it's not quite as powerful as the ROG Ally, and the ROG Ally can do a bit more. So let's just say you get the ROG Ally. You can pretty much emulate games from all the way from the second generation all the way up to the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Now, the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, you're going to hit some snags with it, as not everything is completely compatible, but there's a good, from what I understand and from what I've seen of videos and all, there's a good chunk of games that you can play on there emulated, and they're not that bad, right? So, and they're still making improvements on it. Specifically the PS3 one, which is surprising because supposedly the PS3 was more difficult to develop for, but my understanding is that the PS3 seems to be a bit further along in emulation than the Xbox 360. But one kind of spot that's been lacking, though, in emulation has been the original Xbox, actually. Excuse me. So the Microsoft's first system out. And it just hasn't been the best. I've tried emulating it before, like for example, on my ROG Ally. And I can get up to, there's some games that it can run fairly okay, actually. And I'm like, for example, I'm glad I can play Jet Set Radio Future on there. Again, that just doesn't have a re-release anywhere else. but there's still definitely some games though that it just can't run on there. My understanding is that a lot of these people that do these emulators and all, they're doing it for free a lot of times, I think, or just on really limited budget, and also time as well too. Is some of them probably do it on their spare time, I would assume. So, hey, I mean, that's cool, right? And all that we get what we can get. But unfortunately, just what it is, though, is that Xbox emulation has been a bit behind, though. And because either, again, not all the games are going to be compatible, and you need a pretty strong device to even try to get it going, right? And so like I said, right, I have the ROG Ally X, or the ROG Ally, which is pretty powerful, but even then it struggles with emulating Xbox games. So like some of the games that I've really been wanting on there, like the Project Gotham racing games, last time I checked, they didn't run very well on that. So, it just is what it is, right, with the state of Xbox emulation. Luckily, most of the games, or a lot of good games from the original Xbox, are backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X, but there's still several out there, right, that aren't. And so that's why I really wish that there would be more improvements made over on Xbox emulation at some point soon. Well, we did get some kind of an update on that. And so what it is that Xbox emulation is now available on Android. And I always like it when it's on Android, just because I love having it, like, for example, on my Odin 2, right, where I can play it handheld. I can plug it into the TV if need be. So I don't know. I just love Android emulation. And so I was watching this video on it. There's this really great YouTuber. His name is Retro Game Corps. He does incredible breakdowns on how to do emulations and all. So if you're really trying to get into emulation, check out his channel. He has a whole treasure trove of videos on how to do emulation and all. Well, anyways, one of his latest videos that he came out with was he's showing off this Xbox emulation on like Android. And it's cool that it's on there, but it does come with some snags though. Number one being that it seems that it's still not running that well. I mean, he was running it like on the Odin 3, which is pretty much the most powerful Android device out there, as far as I know. And it struggles to run some of these games, right? Like Halo, or, for example, or like Dead or Alive 2 or 3, I think. It's just not running at 100%. And the other thing too is that it's $8 as well too. So it's a little pricey for an emulator, right? Because some emulators are free, some of them you do have to pay for. And I mean, if it's a good emulator, and if it's just like a one-time fee, then sure, yeah, I've supported several of them, in the past. But $8 is a bit steep, and then also seems to be some controversy where the money isn't going to the original developers. Something like that. I kept seeing that in the comments and then the reviews of the emulator. So just FYI on that. But if you are interested in it, it's called X1 Box on the Android store. So if you search for that, you can find it on there. Again, just watch videos of it first and all, because it's still a bit, it's not that great yet. And I think I saw some comments too, where it's saying something that the original developers were going to be coming out with one soon. So I'd maybe hold off on this one and maybe give it a month or two or so and see if there's been any future development on that there. But either way, though, it's kind of exciting, though, that hopefully this will garner some interest in Xbox emulation, that maybe the developers of this are given more time or funding to continue improving on it. Because, like I said, it's kind of a sore spot in emulation right now that we just don't really have emulation that's done really well on it. Because there was a lot of great games that came out on the Xbox, and a lot of them have just been, unfortunately, inaccessible because they're just not available anywhere else. Again, I'll give kudos to Xbox for keeping some of these games alive through their Xbox Series X, backwards compatibility, but there's still tons of them out there that are missing, right? I mean, I can think of like some favorites of mine that I had back then, like Brute Force. That was a game that I really liked. The Dead or Alive games also. The original Halo and Halo 2. I mean, I know you can get them on the Master Chief, but I still feel it's important to keep the original ones alive somehow. Let's see, what's another one? Jade Empire. Well, Jade Empire is available on the backwards compatibility, I think. And let's see, I know there are some other ones out there. The Project Gotham Racing games, I think those are incredible games. And the Chronicles of Riddick game also, the Escape from Butcher Bay. And several others, I just can't think off the top of my head right now, but that I feel like Xbox emulation just, hopefully it'll become more of a good thing later on, right? Where, the emulation is improved on. But let's jump over to another story here. And so this is for God of War. So some information has come out on this potential new God of War game, but got people a bit split on it. And so from what it sounds like, and I didn't quite catch where all this information was coming from, but from what it sounds like, it's a God of War game. It's going to be like a side game, and it seems to take place before the events of like the God of War North mythology games or something to that effect. And it's being directed by Corey Balrog. And so if the leaks are to be believed, you control Faye in this one. So Faye is Kratos' late wife in the original God of War games. And, just little quick, I mean, it happens right at the beginning, right? But basically in the first God of War game, your wife had just passed, right? Faye. And so the story revolves partly around that without, going into more spoilers. But this one here, though, it looks like it's going back and you actually control Faye. Now, Faye, she's been described in here, right, as being a really powerful character. And I mean, she pretty much, she was given the Leviathan, which is the axe that Kratos uses. And then also she's fought like Thor, right, and pretty much held her ground in it. So she's no pushover, right? She's definitely can hold her own. But anytime you're changing the main character of series, as who you're going to be playing, that's definitely going to come up with some controversy, right? I mean, I guess I would have to see what exactly direction they're going with this and if it makes sense, right? Because I mean, she definitely has a backstory where it would make sense, I guess, as a side character. I just hope that, when they do stuff like this, if it's a side game and all, then sure, it can work as long as they're not taking away from what people really want to play God of War games for. I mean, your God of War is Kratos, basically, and so people want to play as Kratos. Or that if there is going to be another character that's going to take over, that there's more of a build up to that, I guess, right? Because the way, the last game we got, the Ragnarok, the way that game ends, I mean, you're still pretty much Kratos, right? So again, I guess if they were making like a completely new Kratos or a God of War game where she's the star, then that I think would be a problem. But if it's a side game of some sort, and if they can get the right story, game mechanics, and all, then I mean, I can see that working. So I guess it's just one of those things where I have to see what exactly they're doing with this, right? And that's even if the rumors are to be believed, but it definitely sounds like it is, right? I mean, everything is pointing towards that direction. There was a bunch of stuff that I saw on it that it sounds like this could be very well legit. And so I'm intrigued enough to know, like, okay, let's just see what this is all about, to at least keep an open mind about it. All right, took a little break there and had a little bit of a frustrating little moment there. So usually when I record, the big bulk of my podcast here that I do is on early Sunday morning. And so just been having a little routine where I got the girls here, and so usually they're still asleep by the time I start recording this. So I just order some Starbucks just to get them a little breakfast, and then also get my venti caramel protein matcha with chocolate foam. And as lame as that sounds, it's actually pretty good. I've been kind of addicted to it. But yeah, just my little routine that I have, right? And also that way they can, have a little bit of breakfast and, I'm in here recording this. But when I got, so I ordered it from Uber Eats. And so when I went out there and got my order, the whole bag is leaking. So my drink had spilled, and so it left a mess there on my walkway, leading up to the door. And you can just see like the drink was leaking as the driver, was coming up to the door and all. I mean, there's like a trail of it. And even in the picture that the driver took, they'll take a picture right when they leave it at your house. You can see the leak going up to, that's coming out of the, coming out of the bag. Got no communication or nothing. So I spent a little time just trying to clean it all up and try to wash it off my walkway there, right? Because otherwise that coffee or the chocolate and all that, right, kind of stains on there. And so I'm like, so just spend some time trying to report an issue with it, right, and all, to hopefully try to get a refund on that. But very annoying. It spilled most of my drink, so I just have like the last little bit of it, and I kind of got on the packaging of the food items, but those are still good. So a little annoying, but first world problems. But still, that was my drink. But let's move over now to the next story. And so that is there's some rumors that came out of two potential remakes or remasters of some sort that we might be getting from two of Nintendo's most critically acclaimed games of all time. These leaks do come from this guy named Nash Weedle, who he seems to have a, not the best track record, but not the worst either. So, I think it was enough for people to start talking about it, right? That there might be something going on with this. Excuse me. I don't know the full extent of the story, so I do apologize. I just kind of read some headlines on this, but I kept seeing it in a lot of different, things that I follow right online and all that. At the very least, people were speculating like, there could be something to this story, right? Again, it's not 100% confirmed, so it's complete rumor. But the rumor goes, though, that there could be a remake of Super Metroid coming out, developed by Mercury Steam, along with it's being rumored, right, and all for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, right, that it's coming out. Some kind of a remake is in the works too. Also, nothing was really specified as far as I know on when these could come out, but that's sort of the rumor that's out there, right, that these two games are in the works and should be some kind of announcement of some sort somewhat soon. So, I mean, Ocarina of Time, I do feel needs a remake. We've already kind of talked about this before on this game. The game is, it's incredible, right? The Nintendo, even if we're talking about the Nintendo 64 one, it's still an amazing game. Has some issues with it, right? Mainly with the slow dialogue and the just some of the control schemes and all. But for the most part, it's still a very playable game and still really incredible. Still to this day, right? One of the best games of all time. But I feel like it could use get cleaned up some more. Because the 3DS version that came out, that's a really excellent version. That's my preferred way of playing that game, just because I feel like they really updated a lot of the little issues that the first or the original one had, and just looks a little bit nicer, even though you're stuck on playing it on the small screen there, right? There's ways to mod it and all that, of course, yes, right. But if we're just talking about the original retail release. But I feel like remake Ocarina of Time, it's due for a remake. This is one that I can see that it would be they'd be validated, right, and all to do a remake of this one here, as long as you keep the original available. So, for example, even if it's on the Nintendo Switch Online, then I'd be good with that, right? That as long as they keep the original available somehow, that they do a remake. Super Metroid, though, that's a bit of a tougher one for me, just because. The game is almost damn near perfect for me, and for them to do some kind of a remake, and if it's being done by Mercury Steam, obviously they're going to do it in the style of like Metroid Samus Returns or the Metroid Dread, they're excellent games. I don't get me wrong, I think those games are good, but they still don't compare right to Super Metroid, though. And another thing too also is that, I do like the art style and the graphics in all of those two games, more specifically Metroid Dread. I don't know if I'd want to see that with Super Metroid. The pixel art to Super Metroid is just timeless, and I don't know. I wouldn't want to see that, actually. The only thing I would want to see maybe in a Super Metroid remake, right, if we ever got something like that, or a remaster, is very simple. Let's do widescreen support. This is just a small little nitpick of mine and all, but I used to kind of hate when, like, especially 16-bit games where, like, whatever the UI was. So, for example, in Super Metroid, at the top of the screen where you have your life, your missile count and all, where there's like a black bar, underneath it. I just used to bug me when I used to see that in games from this generation. So get rid of that, and widescreen support, give us maybe some scanline filters or something to that effect, and that's it. That's it. That's all it needs, really. I know that for some people the jumping can be a little bit floaty, so perhaps that can be improved on. But I think that if you start messing with that, then you're really kind of messing with the overall structure of the game. So I wouldn't even personally mess with it, and I personally don't mind it. So that's about the only thing I would want if there was like a remake or remaster. But I'm open to it, of course, right? And not just because I love the game so much, and I'd still be curious to see what they could do with a remake. As long as, again, this game is easily emulated, so I guess it's not that big of a deal, right? And because we'll still have access to the original one way or the other, and it is on the Nintendo Switch Online too. But the game is just almost perfect as it is, and it's perfect as it is because of the time that it was created in, right? And so not no knock against Mercury Steam. Like I said, they've done an incredible job with Metroid Dread, but Super Metroid is Super Metroid, and it's just one of those games that is almost timeless. That if you are going to remake or remaster it, it's almost like don't mess with the formula too much because it was almost near perfect the way it is. But we'll see. But I'd be lying though if I said that I wasn't excited about the thought of that, right? So again, it's just a rumor, so we don't know what's going to come of it. But I'll keep my eye out on this as the story develops, and if something does end up coming of it, then I'll try to keep up with the story on this. Speaking of Nintendo, though, so they are suing the U.S. government. Good job, Nintendo. After all this stuff we've talked about right in the past episodes and all that, Nintendo's been suing this and this. Now they're going for the top dog of the U.S. government. I mean, that's pretty much the last level, right? The last boss, But in all honesty, it's just not Nintendo. It's a lot of different companies. Like I think FedEx and Costco are also suing them and what it is, it's just a tariff, right? That's been going on, and starting from last year, and so I think a lot of companies are lawyering up and starting to sue them, right, for everything that's happened with the tariffs and all. And so again, it's not unique to Nintendo and all, but they certainly are doing it though. And so we'll see what plays out of the story here. I mean, that's quite the battle, I'm sure, right, that they're looking to take on. And so I'm curious to see what comes out of this, and just really with all the companies, right, that are actually trying to sue the U.S. government regarding the tariffs, see what comes out of it. And I'll try to keep up with the story as much as I can, but it'll be interesting how this all shakes out. But that ties to a whole lot of other stuff going around the world. And so we probably won't get an update on the story, I would assume, until sometime later, but I don't know. I can't say that for sure. So it'll be interesting on how it all shakes out. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny. I was like, damn, Nintendo ain't fucking around. But like I said, right, there's a lot of companies. And because I would think, my thought, I don't know for sure, but my thought is that we'll probably start seeing some other companies too start doing the same thing. And that's across from like a lot of different, industries, right? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But going on to one of the bigger stories though that came out this past week, and so it was originally rumored that the PlayStation, I think, did I touch base on this last week? I don't recall, but basically that there was the rumor that the PlayStation games were now going to start moving away from doing PC games, and so because of that, it was just causing a lot of concern, right? Like they're not doing PC games anymore. Because Sony started doing this, what was it, like a few years ago, right? It wasn't too long ago. And so they started putting out some of their, main games out there. So like some of their single player games like The Last of Us, God of War, Horizon, Zero Dawn, Ghost of Tsushima, I think recently came out too, Returnal, Ratchet and Clank. So that kind of seemed to be their motto, or not their motto, their strategy, where they're going to be. It kind of seemed like they're doing their main single player games were going to be coming out on the PlayStation first, and then roughly a year later or so that would come out on the PC. I mean, it seemed like a sound strategy, right? I'm not an expert on any of this, right? So I'm just kind of speculating here, but it seemed like, not a bad strategy because you're tapping into the PC market, which has just grown immensely. And so you're still getting that ear where it's exclusive to your system. But then, after that, you can tap into the PC market. And so that, I mean, sounded good on paper, but apparently not. So it's been confirmed from that Jason Schreier dude that, he's a pretty popular video game journalist. And so he's confirmed that that's the case, that they're not doing PC games anymore. And the reason for that seems to be that it's been hurting console and game sales. So apparently it wasn't very lucrative for them to do that. And, they're thinking maybe they're just going back to just, keeping everything exclusive to their system now, which, I mean, nowadays it's, I don't have any loyalty to any company. I mean, when I was a kid, I did to Sega, but, that was what, God, 40, almost 40 years ago. So now, I mean, and I understand, I mean, that I am geek enough of this, to be, for video games that I own, most of the consoles, right? It's just, it's a hobby of mine. I enjoy video games from a lot of different spectrums. I mean, if you look at like my YouTube shorts and all, I got video games from all over the place there, right? It's just because I just love video games. I love the certain video games specifically for a lot of nostalgic reasons, for story reasons, for even almost philosophical reasons in some cases, but also the technology behind it, right? I just really enjoy video games across all the different systems that they come out on. I'm very fascinated with just the video game history in general, and a big part of the reason why I've been doing this podcast. So again, I just love video games in general. So I definitely don't have an affiliation for any kind of console or company. Having said that, though, I understand that not everyone can have like more than one system. And so with that tends to come a certain loyalty to a certain brand, right? And so, so if you're, I don't know. I mean, I can imagine like if you're an Xbox fan only, right? And because you can only have the Xbox, I mean, that's the system you went with. And with everything going on with the Xbox, I can see how that can be a little bit frustrating, right? But I mean, and again, I'm not an expert on any of this and all, but for me, I was just kind of always looking at, I mean, I guess it goes a few different ways, right? Because I do miss the exclusivities that we had before, because I felt that it gave every system a unique sort of identity. Like you bought a Nintendo system because of Nintendo games. You bought a PlayStation because of PlayStation games. And at a certain point, you would buy an Xbox because of Xbox games. And then if you wanted just kind of a mishmash of everything, but not quite the main exclusives, you would get a PC, right? I mean, that tends to seem to be the thought for a while. But another frame of thought on that is, if you want your game to, is it fair, right? Just to keep a game under a certain system, right? Where everyone should have access to it. I mean, I like for me right now, I like playing games as easily accessible as I can, right? And so for that, I do tend to like, say like, for example, like the Nintendo Switch 2, I know it's been getting a lot of hate and all, but I'm liking it now that it has access to play some of the bigger AAA third-party games on it, right? Along with the Nintendo games, and I can also take it on the go. That to me is a big convenience factor, right? For me personally, right? But the other side of that though is that, what happens to competition? Because I'm still a big believer, though, that competition is one of the things that has, pushed a lot of these developers and publishers and all to make some incredible games because they're trying to compete against the other. And I mean, I think back like on the, starting with the console wars with the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, both systems had an incredible output of games on their systems that were unique to their system. So you wanted to get a Genesis because of Sonic and Streets of Rage and Phantasy Star and, those kind of games, where you got a Nintendo because you wanted Super Mario World or Legend of Zelda or Super Metroid and such. And, and you were just, and it was just an incredible output of games. Same thing with like, when we had to an extent, the PlayStation, the Nintendo 64, and the Sega Saturn, but then also like in the sixth generation, even though the PlayStation 2 dominated, by a large margin as far as like sales goes, but the systems that were out during that stretch though, all had incredible games on there, right? And so I feel like the competition really brings out the best in a lot of these developers, right, for the system that they're making it for. So that's my main concern right there, is that if everything was on everything, then what does that do for competition? All right, because right now, I mean, like for example, Sony doesn't have a whole lot of like exclusive games to their PlayStation, right, that are really genre defining or generational defining or anything like that. I mean, it has some exclusives, but nothing that's been really groundbreaking. But they've been selling a lot of systems, and I think a lot of it just has to do because, well, Xbox really has nothing. They have nothing to compete against, and so therefore Sony just sort of becomes a default system, right, for people to get, but maybe not necessarily because it's got all the best games or all the greatest exclusives, right? And so I guess that's the concern, because even though, yes, it's selling really well, but it still comes down to, when I think about the PlayStation 5, I mean, there's only a handful of exclusives that I can think of, right? That make the system worth owning. But, just some thought on that, right? Like I said, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. We'll see what happens. I mean, I kind of like the idea of it to an extent. And so we'll see how this all plays out, though. But apparently, yeah, it wasn't just working out for them as far as not having or having their systems on PC, right? It just wasn't apparently financially feasible for them. So it's interesting, I guess, because I think they said that they had like Ghost of Yotei and Saros that were planned to go onto the system, or I'm sorry, on PC, but those ended up getting canceled. So it's a thing. I mean, they're not putting games on PC anymore, at least for the time being. So we'll see if there's anything else comes to this story, but that's the latest reporting on that I am aware of. But speaking of that, though, PC, and maybe this kind of plays a hand into why Sony made this decision in some way. I don't know how, maybe, but possibly. But Xbox announced their new system. So it's official. So Asha Sharman, I believe is her name, so the new CEO of Xbox. So I think she came out with a tweet, but basically they made an official announcement of their new upcoming system, which is called, codename at the moment, Project Helix. And there hasn't been a whole lot released on this as of yet. It was just a tweet that she made, I believe. And it had like the logo of it and all, but it's an official statement from Xbox. So Project Helix, it's going to play Xbox games of some sort, I guess, and also PC games. And more information to come within the next few weeks. So we might get something this week or so. I'm not sure if something hasn't been announced already yet as of the time of this recording. But yeah, it's official. We're getting some kind of a new Xbox hardware. But it plays PC games. So I don't know. Is it going to be like the ROG Xbox or the Xbox ROG Ally X, whatever the hell it's called, where it picks on that? I mean, it's basically a PC. I mean, you can get Steam games on there. You can get GOG games on there. You can also get games from the Xbox game store, right? So my thought is that it's going to be something along the lines of that. And I mean, if that's the case, I don't know. I guess it's just I have to see more of it, and see what exactly they're doing, because they're kind of taking the opposite approach now of what Sony's doing, right? Where now it's like, fuck it, just throw everything on there, right? The PC game, sure. Xbox game, sure. Whatever. Are they still doing games on the PlayStation? I don't know. I mean, they just started that, so I don't see them backing out of that yet. But it seems like she's definitely changing things up there, and maybe for the good. I have no idea, right? The whole AI thing and all that's definitely concerning on how that's going to be implemented and all. So at the very least, it seems like she's trying and all. And so I'll just say that let's just see how this plays out. And I don't think we have enough information, at least your general or regular casual person like me, right? I'm not involved in the industry or have like inside information and all, but I think that we don't have enough information to really make the best guess as to how this is all going to play out. We'll just see. I guess let her do her thing, right? I mean, if she burns it to the ground, are we really surprised? But maybe she'll do something good, right? I mean, we don't know. I think the main thing is just that because of her background in AI is the concerning part of it all. But we will see how this all plays out. And I'm curious, right? Xbox, I mean, I guess really, I've had the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X, right? And I like having those systems just because that's generally where I play more of my third-party games. And then also I just like the controller for like first-person shooter style games or like driving games. And I like the ecosystem of it all too also, where again, I can play it on the cloud, and then the backwards compatibility with it, right? With at least a lot of the major like Xbox 360 and Xbox games I can play on there. So I like the ecosystem behind it all. And so, but when it comes to like, if I'm talking about like what we were talking about earlier, like exclusive games, I mean, really ever since the Xbox One, there just hasn't really been a much like, yeah, sure. Maybe I like playing, like let's say Gears of War more on the Xbox because I just like the controller for those kind of games more than the PlayStation One. If it came down to it, if I was really in a position where I could only have one system, then I mean, and if I can get Gears of War on the PlayStation, no big deal, right? When it comes down to it, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people or other similar games like that, right? But I I would like, because again, it's going back to the competition thing. I would like to see Xbox do something where they're a force to be reckoned with, because they're bringing something unique to the table that that gets people to say, okay, that's why I want an Xbox, because I can get this kind of game on it, or maybe I don't know, something with their ecosystem and all that they can do. I mean, for me personally, it's going to come down to like, what exclusive games are you guys going to do, or what is something that Microsoft is doing that is say like, okay, the games that you guys are outputting is good, because when it comes down to it, that's what we want. We just want good games, right? Sure, how you play them and all that definitely factors into it, but we just want cool games, right? So we'll see. I'm not really putting a whole lot of stock into this as far as how successful it's going to be, but I'm intrigued though. I'm curious, right? And I don't know if I'll actually get the system though when it comes out, because like I said before, I'm already kind of bowing out of a lot of this new stuff. But we'll see. My thought in my head, and kind of why I had a little bit of a fascination with the Steam machine, which actually I'll touch base on a little bit on that here in a bit, but is I'm not so much like interested in getting like the newest systems as far as for like trying to get the newer games and all, but where I might consider getting a system is if, for example, if it's I can do some emulation on it, right? Like more higher end emulation, mainly for the sake of just continuing with video game preservation. So, like the Steam machine, part of the reason that I was interested in it, because it seems not super powerful, but fairly powerful and all, where I can probably still have like a lot of games emulated on there from like possibly all the way up to the PS3 and the Xbox 360. I guess I'd have to see how that machine runs and all to see if it's powerful enough for that. Because if it is powerful enough for that, then I might consider getting it, right? For reasons like that. So let's just say like if the Xbox, because it's going to be PC friendly to an extent, if it can also like house like a lot of emulation, so kind of like what I use my Xbox Series S honestly for, then that's where I might be interested in it, right? For, again, just to kind of continue to keep preserving video games and all. But we'll see what comes of that. It's still early. That's as much as I know. That's been about as much as it's been announced. I'm sure there's a lot of more speculation that can go behind that. That's just what I saw. Hopefully they'll release more information on that, and so we kind of get a better idea of what's going on. But really quick though on the Steam machine, so I did see something that they did announce that it's supposedly still coming out sometime this year. I mean, you would think, right? Considering that it was supposed to get announced, the speculation was earlier this year, but I don't think they've still announced the actual release date. Like they just said like, yep, it's coming out in 2026, but it's still being on hold. And so we have no idea yet, as far as I know, what the price is and the actual release date, or more specifications as far as what the system actually is. I mean, we already have a good idea, right, and all, but just more actual info. So we'll see, I guess, what comes of this. But let's now start getting into the year of 2010 and all the great stuff that this year brought to us here. So first off, we will go over some general statistics, information, and all of what happened throughout this year, and then we'll get into the actual games themselves. So 2010. So we got some stuff this year. Some pretty cool stuff. So numerous video games were released in 2010. Many awards went to such games such as Red Dead Redemption, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Mass Effect 2, God of War 3, and Super Mario Galaxy 2. Kinect from Microsoft Studios for the Xbox 360 was also released this year. Series with new installments in 2010 include Ace Attorney, Alien vs. Predator, Army of Two, Assassin's Creed, Battlefield, BioShock, Castlevania, Call of Duty, Civilian, Crackdown, Donkey Kong, Darksiders, Dead Rising, Fable, Fallout, God of War, Gran Turismo, Grand Theft Auto, Halo, Just Cause, Kane and Lynch, Lost Planet, Mafia, Mass Effect, Medal of Honor, Mega Man, Metroid, Need for Speed, Pokemon, Prince of Persia, Red Dead, Red Steel, Resident Evil, Skate, StarCraft, Star Wars The Force Unleashed, Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Mario, Super Monkey Ball, Tom Clancy's Hawks, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, and Total War. In addition, 2010 saw the introduction of several new properties, including Alan Wake, Darksiders, Deadly Premonition, Heavy Rain, and Metro. Hardware releases this year. So this year saw the release of the Sony PlayStation Move and Microsoft's Kinect, which are motion controller peripherals made to compete with Nintendo's Wii. In addition, Nintendo also released the Wii Remote Plus, which was a Wii remote with a built-in Motion Plus sensor. Two consoles revisions were also released this year. The Nintendo DSi XL which initially launched in Japan last year, and the Xbox 360S. I could say that with the Xbox 360S. So I eventually ended up getting that one. And I was a big fan of that console right there. Just the overall design, never had any issues with it. I thought it looked pretty sleek, and it was a good new sort of a facelift, right, for that console, specifically since the the original model, right, was just prone to a lot of hardware failure. And so, yeah, so there was a lot of things going on, though, this year with motion controls. And, I think that Sony and Microsoft were like, wow, Nintendo's making a killing with this. Let's come out with our own version of it. And, let's just go over some information on this, right, before I forget later on, because I wasn't too invested in any of this here, but I know that it was a moment in video game history, right, where, again, Nintendo was just killing it. Again, well, they started it off like that with the Nintendo Wii, and then, I think there was two different approaches to it. My thought, anyways, is that, so obviously the Nintendo built their whole Wii around motion controls. The thing was, though, is that, so the Nintendo Wii came out in 2006. So we're already 4 years into this generation's lifetime. And so at this time already in 2010, I think that, like, because at least I know for me personally, I was kind of over motion controls. And I think that was sort of the sentiment all the way around, right? That people were just kind of like, motion controls, sure, it was cool. Like everybody had like their little honeymoon session, right, with the Wii, where it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool, and all. But then after a while, it's like, meh, And so, because the hardware, I think, I could be wrong on this, but the Wii like sold incredibly well, right? I mean, it was the top selling system of this generation. But I could be wrong on this, but I think that a lot of those sales came within the first several years of its launch. But then afterwards, it really started going downhill. And as people were just kind of getting over the whole motion control thing. So when the Move for the PlayStation and the Kinect were announced for the Xbox, I kind of remember like conversations at the time being like, really? Why are they doing this? I mean, nobody's really interested in motion control anymore. So it almost seemed like they were a little late to this. And so from what I recall, Microsoft did kind of want to make the Microsoft Kinect a thing. Like it seemed like they were really wanting to make this a big deal for them. And this is where the Xbox 360 kind of starts going downhill some, because they were going in kind of a different direction, right? Where they were trying to get into maybe their way of getting into the casual market, or also where the Xbox was more than just a video game console, right? Because around this time is also where they started putting some emphasis on, the PlayStation also, right? Where you had like YouTube, Netflix, and things like that. But I think like the Xbox was trying to put a little bit more emphasis on that. And that'll come into play, here in the next couple of years. But the Kinect, though, they really wanted to make it a thing. And honestly, the technology behind the Kinect is actually pretty impressive. So let's dive into these systems, or not. Well, actually, sorry. Before I do that, so Microsoft kind of seemed like they were wanting to do the Kinect, make the Kinect the thing. Like, okay, the Wii was really successful. This is like the next step up, because as far as the technology goes, the Kinect was pretty impressive. Sony, on the other hand, had the Move, which it's kind of more of a middle ground between the Wii and the Kinect, where the Move, it's sort of like this, I don't know, it's like a wand looking thing almost, right? That has like this bulb that lights up. And I actually bought the PlayStation Move controller somewhat recently, because I got the House of the Dead 3 and 4 on there, because you can get them on the PlayStation 3. So I was like, I better get these before the store closes down. And so I was like, well, let me get this Move so I can, because I kind of miss like gun games, right? So I want to play them at least in a way that was sort of like back in the day, right? Where it feels more natural, right? Enough to play a light gun game like that instead of with the controller. Because I'll say that the light gun style games that I can play on the Wii are really fun that way. And so I got the Move, but then I started realizing, I was like, oh, right, I think I got to buy the PlayStation iToy thing or whatever it's called. And I haven't gotten around to getting that. But anyways, so it's an interesting little device. And it seems to be that it's more responsive and accurate than the Wii is, or the Wii mode is. I don't know. I guess I'm not sure, like the comparison as far as accuracy goes between the Move and, let's say, the Wiimote Plus that came out also this year for the Wii. I'm not sure, but either way, basically what PlayStation was kind of doing is like, hey, we're not trying to make it a thing. It's just, here's this extra peripheral that you can get that has some games exclusive to it if you're interested in that. but I've been taking these little breaks as I've been recording this. As my daughter, she's up now, my youngest one, and so they both have this thing where both my daughters, where they have like these kind of like these squishy sort of like dumpling toy kind of thing, but somehow you can fill it in. You can fill it up with water, and so what they'll do is that they'll fill it up with water and then they'll put it in the freezer. And then they just like the texture and the coldness of it, and all they like playing with it. So right now, my youngest daughter, she's walking around with it, like putting it in a blanket and, treating it like a baby. So it's just interesting, some of the little things that they pick up on. But let's talk about the Kinect though, right? So get some information on this. So let's see. So I never did own the Kinect, but it was pretty impressive though. So the Kinect is a discontinued line of motion sensing input devices produced by Microsoft and first released in 2010. The devices generally contain RGB cameras and infrared projectors and detectors that map depth through either structured light or time of flight calculations, which can in turn be used to perform real-time gesture recognition and body skeletal detection, among other capabilities. They also contain microphones that can be used for speech recognition and voice control. Kinect was originally developed as a motion controller peripheral for Xbox video game consoles, distinguished from competitors such as Nintendo's Wii Remote and Sony PlayStation's Move by not requiring physical controllers. The first generation Kinect was based on technology from Israeli company PrimeSense and unveiled at E3 2009 as a peripheral for Xbox 360, codenamed Project NATO. It was first released on November 4th of 2010 and would go on to sell 8 million units in its first 60 days of availability. The majority of the games developed for Kinect were casual, family-oriented titles, which helped attract new audiences to Xbox 360, but did not result in wide adoption by the console's existing overall user base. As part of the 2013 unveiling, okay, we're getting into the next system there. So basically, yeah, right. So again, it was. I mean, the technology behind it is pretty cool, and that was the whole point, right? I think that there's always been this assumption that the next generation of video games is going to involve some kind of like virtual reality where you don't need a controller, you're actually in the game, things like that, right? But none of it has really taken off, though. Like I mean, to an extent, the Wii did, but I think a lot of that helped because of Nintendo, the Nintendo games, the Nintendo name, and so forth. When they tried to do the Kinect and then the Move, they didn't. I mean, it sold really well at first, but it just wasn't really like, like they said, right? It wasn't adopted by the overall user base. Virtual reality, we'll get into that a little bit later, right? But, in the later years, but that also hasn't quite taken off the way I'm sure a lot of companies would hope they would. I mean, just how it can read your overall body movements, though, and all was pretty impressive. But, but yeah, this kind of stuff just has never really taken off. And I don't know if it ever really will. I mean, it's certainly, a novelty, right? And I got to say, just touching base a little bit on VR, I mean, it's pretty cool for sure. But I think at the end of the day, people just rather play with a controller, right? I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we would want something like the Kinect, just like a more advanced version of it, or VR. But they were certainly trying during this stretch here. And unfortunately for Microsoft, going forward from here, I mean, they still had some pretty cool games. Like this year they did. And then there's still some big hits that came out in the next few years. But this is where Xbox started kind of going away from like being like a hardcore gamer's console, and it was really around this time, I would say after 2010 is sort of where the downfall of Xbox started. And this is sort of a part of it here was because of stuff like the Kinect, not specifically just the Kinect, right? There was a lot of other things that factored into it, but it was just kind of getting sort of where Xbox is sort of trying to steer away from a lot of things that people really liked their systems in the first place. Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the start of it, and it was a cool novelty, I guess, right? I never messed around with the Kinect, but it's it's cool in technology, the technology behind it and all. It just wasn't something that I think the majority of hardcore gamers were willing to try, or the casual gamer, right? And all wasn't completely invested in either as well. But jumping over to the PlayStation Move, though. So let's talk a little bit about this here. So the PlayStation Move is a motion game controller developed by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Initially released in 2010 for use for the PlayStation 3 home video game console, its compatibility was later expanded to its successor, the PlayStation 4, its PlayStation VR platform, and the PlayStation 5. A revised model of the controller with a micro USB terminal is not backwards compatible with PS3. Oh, I didn't know that. Conceptually similar to Nintendo's Wii remote, its function is based around the controller input in games stemming from actual physical movement of the player. The move uses inertial sensors in the wand to detect motion, while the wand's position is tracked using a PlayStation Eye or a PlayStation camera. The device was generally well received by critics, but has not quite met Sony's goals for integration into the market. So a bit about the hardware. So as the standard PlayStation 3 wireless controller, 6-axis and DualShock 3, both the main PlayStation Move motion controller and the PlayStation Move navigation controller use Bluetooth 2.0 and an internal lithium-ion battery charged via a USB mini port on the controller. On the PlayStation 3, up to 4 motion controllers can be used at once, or 2 Move motion controllers or 2 Move navigation controllers. Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting, but like I said, I mainly thought it'd be kind of cool to use it for, again, like gun games and all. But then when I realized that you'll have to get the PlayStation Eye and all, and or the camera, I just haven't gone around to that. But so again, but that was sort of Sony's approach, at least from what I can gather back then. It's like, hey, we have some games on this that you can get if you want, but Sony was still at the time sticking to like their exclusives as like the main focus of their overall business practice, right? Where, we have the cool exclusives still, as a lot of these cool games started coming out. And, but at the same time, for people that want to play casual games, there you go, right? I can't think of anything really for the PlayStation Move that was like a must buy. Again, outside of maybe just like some like-on games, but I think that Sony was sort of trying to play it safe, like kind of more like testing out the waters on this, where Microsoft wanted to almost seemingly get all in on the motion control thing, right? And the Wii was already in it, but kind of on its way out on it as well too. So it was an interesting time, right, as they were experimenting around with this stuff here. But okay, I think that's enough on that there. Like I said, wasn't too heavily invested in all of that stuff there. But for critically acclaimed titles, so the highest rated game of this year was for Super Mario Galaxy 2, had a overall rating of 97.35 according to Game Rankings. Metacritic score was at 97 out of 100. So definitely another incredible game from Nintendo. Game of the year for kind of across the board, it seemed to be basically between Red Dead Redemption and Mass Effect 2. Both of them are incredible games, and so really, I mean, whichever one, right? Take your pick, right? I mean, they're both outstanding games, and we'll talk about those later here. But let's see. So let's go over some events that happened this year. Looks like we got a few things to go over. So on January 7th through the 10th, January 7th through the 10th, International Consumer Electronics Show 2010 was held in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. February 11th through the 14th, Microsoft X10 was held in San Francisco. February 24th to the 27th, Nintendo World Summit is held in San Francisco. March 9th through the 13th, Game Developers Conference 2010 is held in San Francisco. March 26th to the 28th, the first PAX East Coast at the John B. Hines Veterans Memorial Convention Center is held in Boston. April 15th, Xbox Live for the original Xbox console and games is discontinued. So, again, we're kind of getting to that point, right, where online services, online games and such, right, are starting to be shut down. So I think this is where people are starting to realize, like, oh, shit, yeah, this isn't forever. But April 20th to the 23rd, Captivate Capcom's annual trade show was held in Honolulu, Hawaii. May 4th through the 7th, the Humble Indie Bundle, an experiment into indie charitable cross-platform DRM-free digital game distribution, is first released to great success. May 30th, esports organization FaZe Clan is founded. June 15th through the 17th, E3 2010 is held at the Los Angeles Convention Center. June 17th through the 19th, On Live is released. August 12th through the 15th, QuakeCon was held in the Hotel Hilton Anatoly in Dallas, Texas. April 16th through the 18th, the Game Developers Conference was held in Europe in Cologne. August 18th through the 22nd, Gamescom 2010 was held in Cologne, Germany. September 3rd through the 5th, Penny Arcade Expo 2010 was held at Washington State Convention Center in Seattle. In September 15th to the 21st, the PlayStation Move was launched in North America, Europe, and various Asian countries. September 16th through the 19th, the Tokyo Game Show 2010 was held at Makuhari Messe in Japan. September 30th to October 3rd, the 2010 World Cyber Games takes place. October 22nd to the 23rd, BlizzCon 2010 was held at Anaheim Convention Center in Anaheim, California. And then November 4th through the 7th, Microsoft's Connect launches worldwide, starting in North America. And then in December 11th, the 2010 Spike Video Game Awards was held. Let's see. It looks like we had some passings this year, right, of people that have passed in the video game industry. So on February 24th, so Mark Beaumont of Capcom passed. February 1st, Tommy Pierce, writer of The Last Express, passed. April 29th, Alexander Shafto Sandy Douglas, a computer scientist and creator of the first graphical computer game OXO, passed. Let's see, May 29th, Dennis Hopper. So he was an actor, so age 74. So he had some involvings with video game stuff, right? So like, for example, he was King Koopa in the Super Mario Brothers movie that came out back in the 90s. He was also Mr. Beautiful in Hell, a cyberpunk thriller. Walter Pensky in Black Dahlia. Steve Scott in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And George Struggs in Deadly Creatures. June 26th, Jonathan Smith, age 57, British game developer, notable for developing many titles for the ZX Spectrum, including Cobra. On September 7th, Glenn Shadix, 58, so he was an actor. Looks like he was in Demolition Man, The Night Before Christmas, Oogie Boogie, and Kingdom Hearts. He passed. October 29th, Takeshi Shudo, 61, script writer for creator of Luigi for Pokemon. December 9th, John Makepeace Bennett, age 89, computer scientist who worked on Nimrod, one of the first computers capable of playing games. And December 29th, Bridget Berdine, age 48, casting director who worked on God of War 2, passed. Oh, some people pass fairly young. Well, rest in peace. But let's see, is that mainly it for news and such? I believe so. All right, let's get into games now. So here in 2010, talk a little bit about handheld stuff. We had some stuff that came out here. So on the Nintendo DS, so I saw Ace Attorney. I don't know if it originated this year or no. I think Ace Attorney had already been a series right prior to this. I'm not sure, but Ace Attorney got some games though in 2010. I've never played these games, but they're, you know, like you're a lawyer and you're in the courtroom and you're, you know, working a case, but it's kind of has this anime aesthetic to it. So and I think, I could be wrong, but I think on some of the gameplay on the DS, where because the DS has like this microphone that you can, you know, talk into. And I think, like, for example, if you object, you can say objection or something like that. And then the character will respond that way. I believe, I could be wrong on that, but I think I've seen that before. I'd be curious to try these games out just to kind of get a sense of what they're all about. Yeah, there were some Ace Attorney games that came out this year. But also on the Nintendo DS, we had Dragon Quest IX, Sentinels of the Starry Skies. So Dragon Quest games started coming out on the Nintendo DS, and so there were remakes of Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6, and they're really good versions to play, and probably the more preferred versions to play of these games on the Nintendo DS. Well, maybe outside of Dragon Quest 4, because that doesn't have like the talk option, which, you know, takes out a lot of the dialogue in the game. But if you get the Android version of that, that does include that. But anyway, outside of that, though, 4, 5, and 6, they're really good ports, though, that were done, or remakes, I should say, of those Dragon Quest games there. But this one was an original game, though, that came out on the DS. So again, Dragon Quest IX. And so this one here, it's, from what I understand of it, so you create your own character at the start. you're kind of like a angel of some sort, and you're just on a Dragon Quest game, right? I've played a little bit of it a little while ago, and it seems pretty cool and all, but I haven't gotten too deep into it, so I don't know a whole lot about it. But what I do know is that this game seemed to be one of its main features was that um, you can play like multiplayer in it or like online, or you can trade items online or something to that effect. And so from what I've read, when that option was available, it was a pretty cool feature. But again, with a lot of online things and all, from my understanding, those servers have been pulled down. There might be some fan ones out there, right? I'm sure, but like the official ones, they're no longer up. But yeah, I guess I'd still be interested to see if the game is still good even without those options there. But speaking of multiplayer stuff, though, on the Sony PlayStation Portable, we got the Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker game. And so this game was kind of a big deal for the system because the PSP had already had some Metal Gear games that were called like Portable Ops. And they were pretty cool, I guess, for what they were, but they weren't necessarily considered canon, or at least it wasn't. I don't know if it was officially claimed that they were or not, but because the games, to my understanding, weren't like written by Hideo Kojima, so they had the Metal Gear name and then Metal Gear characters and all. But I think it was just kind of more of like a novelty game on the PlayStation Portable. But this one was written by Hideo Kojima, and so the story definitely has this spin on it, right? And it's the game is interesting where it also had this multiplayer component to it where you can go online and with the help of friends and all take out some bosses. And there was also a system in the game where you can recruit soldiers to your base and then you can customize things and all. And so there was a lot of content in this game. But the cool thing was always that some of the ways the game plays out is that it was mission structured. And so like in these small bits, right? So meaning that it kind of made for perfect like play like in quick sessions, and which is great for like portable play. And I haven't beaten this game. I got quite a ways into it, but I don't know, maybe I wasn't playing the game right, but I had a hard time getting through the game because it seems like on some of the bosses that I was fighting, I would just use all my resources basically just to finally beat it. But I think that because the game was kind of meant to be played multiplayer where you have multiple people helping you out, right, to take out said bosses, or maybe I just couldn't figure out the whole weapon system, right, to use the correct weapons on these enemies, because literally I was just going through all my rocket launchers and everything. I was like, holy crap, I'm barely making a dent in these bosses. But anyways, for what it is, it's pretty cool. The story is decent, but I don't know, it's not, certainly not my favorite Metal Gear story, and it feels a bit of a departure right from previous games. So I don't know, something about this game just didn't quite hook me as other Metal Gear games. But the graphics are really nice in it, definitely some of the best on the PSP. And from what I've seen, a lot of people really love this game, though. So I would say that if you are really into the whole Metal Gear lore and all, definitely play this one, because the story to this game is actually important, that leads into the events of Metal Gear Solid 5. So, for example, if you've been playing the series in numerical order, right? So, you got into the series, so you're playing Metal Gear Solid, you liked it, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and then you play Metal Gear Solid 4, and you're like, oh, cool, I love this series, it's cool. Well, there's a Metal Gear Solid 5, so you want to think like, okay, well, let's play that one. Actually, you would probably want to play this one first, because basically the events that happen in this game really tie into the events of Metal Gear Solid 5. And so if you just go into Metal Gear Solid 5 blind, you might be a little lost on what's going on, right? Because again, a lot of the characters and events and all play off of that game there. So just FYI on that. But a lot of people like it, right? And also, like I said, right, it might be worth checking out if you are into the overall Metal Gear lore and all. But another cool game that came out on the PSP was for God of War Ghost of Sparta. And so this one continues on like a 2D platformer, 2D action game, the way like Chains of Olympus is. And it's pretty impressive, again, how much they were able to fit on this PSP system. I mean, it has really cool, epic moments, just like its console games, and just, overall, just really cool, right? It's, I was really impressed with this game, with the graphics, and the gameplay and all. Again, you use the two shoulder buttons and the only analog stick to roll, which is a little bit of annoying. But other than that, though, it plays really well and definitely worth playing. I mean, it has, from what I recall, a pretty cool story, adds more to the overall God of War lore. So yeah, I would definitely check this game out if you're into God of War games. But let's go into multi-platform games, though. So again, these are games that came out at least on the Xbox 360 and the PS3, possibly on the PlayStation, or I'm sorry, on the PC, and possibly also on the Nintendo Wii. But starting off, though, I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to this game, and that's for Rocket Knight. So I was excited when this game came out because it was an indie game that came, and it's based on the Rocket Knight Adventures game. So if you go way back to, I believe, 1993, when I talked about Rocket Knight Adventures on the Sega Genesis, it's one of my all-time favorite games. I absolutely love that game, and I feel it's just like one of the better 2D action platformers from that era, and a very original character and all that. Unfortunately, I just felt like just never really got the chance to shine more, as there was some sequels, the sequels that came out for it, Sparkster, but they never really were quite as good. And so I was surprised when this game came out that it was an indie game. It was a 2D game, only using polygonal graphics and all. And I got the game and I started playing it, and I actually kind of liked it. I thought it was a pretty decent game, but it didn't seem to get the best reviewed and all. And so, I mean, I don't like it more than Rocket Knight Adventures, but I mean, I like it more than, say, like the Sparkster games that came out later on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's out there for cheap somewhere to buy. I would give it a chance. I don't mind this game at all. It has some pretty cool screen-filling bosses. I mean, the gameplay is very much reminiscent of Rocket Knight Adventures. And yeah, I mean, I would recommend checking this game out. It's I'm sure you can find it out there for cheap somehow. So again, it's just called Rocket Knight, and it's not a bad game. I did enjoy my time with this one here. But we also got another entry into the Need for Speed series, and that was for Hot Pursuit. And so I did enjoy this game here. So this one, I believe, was developed by Criterion, who were the developers of the Burnout games. So this game here, you get the option of if you want to be a racer getting chased by the cops, or do you want to be a cop and chase the bad guys? Either way, it's really fun. Great racing action, and yeah, just a really fun game. And yeah, it came out on the PC, or I'm sorry, on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, excuse me, possibly on the PC, I'm not sure. But yeah, really great. Probably one of my more favorite games in the Need for Speed series. This one and Most Wanted are probably, or I also liked Underground too. But yeah, another good game in the series though. Definitely a lot of fun to play. And then wanted to shine a little bit of a spotlight also on this game here for Splatterhouse. So Splatterhouse is a classic going from back in the day, sort of a side-scrolling beat-em-up from Namco with a very gory setting. But this one here now is a 3D action game. And, you know, it's I'm not going to say that this game is, like, amazing. It kind of plays like a beat-em-up game, kind of like God of War to an extent, only with a very slasher film sort of aesthetic to it, very gory and all. But it's not bad, though. It's not bad. And I enjoyed my time with this game. It has some issues with it, and I played it on the PlayStation 3, which I think is the worst version, because I think it runs a bit smoother on the Xbox 360. But I didn't mind this game, though. And it's another game that it's not re-released. It hasn't been re-released, so because I don't think it was that popular. I don't know if the Xbox 360 version is backwards compatible if you have the disc. I'm not sure on that. But I if you like slasher horror flick gore and aesthetics to that and all, and a kick-ass rock soundtrack also, then check out this game. There was some moments in the game that I was like, okay, this is actually pretty badass, right? So you get this your mask that constantly talks to you, right? He talks a bunch of shit. He's pretty funny. And also there's some pretty cool moments. Like there's this one scene where there's this monster or whatever, right, that comes out of an elevator, I think, and it has 2 chainsaws on his hand and all. And then this rock song starts from, I think it's called it's from Lamb of God, Walk With Me in Hell. And as that song starts playing, and then the mask goes, let's show them why we call this Splatterhouse, and I'm like, hell yeah. This is also how I found out there was a lot of songs that I found out from this game. There was ASG, I think is the name of the group. Their song Dream Theater, I think is what it is, which I really love that song too also, and it was all from this game here. So like I said, it's go into it knowing that the gameplay is a bit clunky, that it's not as polished and all. But if you like heavy metal, gore stuff and all that, basically if you like going into hot topics, okay, then I think you can get an appreciation for this game. But like I said, it's not available, to buy on modern consoles as far as I know. I'm gonna actually do a little bit of digging after this podcast. I'm gonna see if I can get this game somehow, because I really enjoyed it for what it is. But yeah, I would recommend trying to check it out if you can get access to it somehow. But another game, though, that it was a series that kind of started becoming a little popular, and that was for Darksiders. And I really like the concept of this game and the series overall, right? But basically, you're playing as one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and then this one you play as War. And so it has kind of like this comic book aesthetic to it. The main character, he's like this bulky, sort of like warrior looking dude with a hood. And it's, but the graphics are still kind of colorful to it, considering that it's kind of has a dark theme to it. But then you get the side character, who I believe is voiced by Mark Hamill. So kind of think like if you have like this kind of like an evil sidekick that's sounds like the Joker, basically, but it's voiced pretty well though and all. And the gameplay is sort of like a combination between Zelda and God of War, but it works though. And I got a little ways into this game, and I really need to go back and beat it, because it's I really enjoyed it. I like the concept to it, that you're like, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse and all. I just thought that was interesting, and the overall world building and everything is very original. And I really enjoyed this game, right? It was an original IP. Well, I mean, as far as video games go, I don't know if it was based on a comic book or that, I'm not sure, but it's very cool though. And eventually this game would get a lot of sequels, because I think that the goal was that you're playing as one of the four horsemen in the in each individual game. Like we got one for Death, and I think we got for one of the other ones, I forgot, but I don't think we've completed the whole four of them though. I could be wrong, but this one in particular though, I think is really good, and I'd love to go back and beat this game at some point, because I did enjoy my time with it. This game eventually got re-released like a remaster on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which cleans up the graphics some, runs at 60 frames per second, so it looks really nice now. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking this one. I can't speak too much for the quality of its later sequels. We'll perhaps touch base on them in the later years, but I can say that this one for sure I would recommend it though. But another game that I've kind of been getting into a little bit is Alien versus Predator. And so this is a first-person shooter game, and where you're, based on the Alien versus Predator comics, where again you're dealing with both of those alien species. And I know you play a soldier, but I think you can also play a predator and an alien, I believe. So a little bit that I played of it, it seems pretty cool. Much improved from like the Alien versus Predator on the Atari Jaguar. But the frame rate can be a bit rough on it. I have it backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X, and I know there's a PC version out there that maybe I'll try to get, because I did like the concept of it, and the bit that I played of it did hook me. So maybe I'll try to give this game, more of a go to try to beat it, as I remember people seemed to like it back then. But we got another Assassin's Creed game, only this time it's continuing on from last year's game, Assassin's Creed 2. Seems like our boy Ezio was a bit popular, and so he got a direct sequel. So Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, I did play a little bit of it, but I never really got too far in it, so I can't really speak too much on the quality of this game. But people seem to like it. It's kind of more Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, so I think there was like an online component to it. I could be wrong, but it's just continuing on the story from Ezio. And like I said, Assassin's Creed 2 and Ezio, they're fan favorites. And so I think like if you really enjoy that game and the characters and all, then I think there'll be a lot to look forward to in this game here. But like I said, I can't speak much more of it. I'm just not too familiar with it. But speaking of kind of a similar game, though, like that is for BioShock 2. So kind of the same thing with BioShock 2. It's continuing on from the original BioShock. Similar style, graphics, and gameplay and all. This is one that I don't know a whole lot of. I never did play it back then, and I still haven't played it even though I own it. And it seems like it was kind of doing more of the same. And it seems like it's not a bad game. I just think that it just doesn't seem like to have the popularity of the first one, though. I think like one of the things is that instead of like so in the old one you had like those big daddies that you would fight that were protecting like those little sisters that are just like these big hulking like things with like a aqua gear on and all, but they have like a drill in their hand and pretty intimidating. In this one, it looks like you have the big sisters to contend with that are kind of more leaner, but I think more agile though versions of the big daddies. My understanding of it, but it seems like it's a cool BioShock game. I don't think, like I said, it was as revolutionary as the first one, but from what I've seen and heard and all, if you like the first one, this is definitely not a bad game to get into. But then we had Dante's Inferno, and so this is another game that I feel went kind of under the radar some, and a lot of it I think had to do because it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from God of War, and seeing as we got some other God of War games, and we already touched base on one of those, but it seemed like it kind of went under the radar for that, and it's not bad though. I did beat this game back then, and I really liked it. It's again, it's like God of War, only you play as Dante and you're going into hell basically, and so you can only imagine all the monstrosities and all that you're going to come across. But it plays really well. It's got a very gory, very dark story to it, and so if you like just basically Dante's Inferno story and the overall concept of that, but in a God of War sort of gameplay style, I think you'll find much to like in this game. From what I recall, it runs at a pretty smooth 60 frames per second, so the character feels very responsive. It all feels well. And yes, it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from God of War, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I really enjoyed this game. I would actually love to go back through it and play it again. I just remember having a lot of fun with it. Because I think it was made by the same developers as Dead Space, which we talked about a little while back. But yeah, excellent game though. God of War, I'm sorry, Dante's Inferno, really cool game. Highly recommend it. But another game too. So this game had some multi-platform games that kind of went a little bit under the radar to an extent, but I think were really cool though. Because another one, and I absolutely love this game, and it's a Transformers War for Cybertron. I was a huge Transformer fan as a kid. You know, me and my brother were. We really enjoyed the cartoons, the toys, and we were all about the Transformers, right? We were 80s kids, and so we're all about that. And so this game here, it has the voice of Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime and some other good voice work, right, for a lot of the other Autobots and Decepticons. And so in this game, it's a third-person shooter running on Unreal Engine 3, which is cool because that engine sort of gives the game a sort of like a dark, gritty look to it that goes really well with the overall Transformers aesthetics. This is right at the height of when like the Transformer movies were also really popular. And so they're not based on the Transformer movies. It's doing its own thing, but a really cool story to it that involves you being in Cybertron. And so the game, the overall story, I mean, you can select if you want to play through like the Decepticons or the Autobots, but to get the overall full story, right, you want to go through it all, and just really well done, incredible set piece moments, and just an absolute blast to play. I think it plays really well. I mean, it can be a little bit repetitive, but it's still really well done though, and I really wish they would re-release these games. There's been rumors that they were and all, but just nothing has come of it. Is, you know, again, it's a licensed game, right? So I'm sure that costs money and all. But just, yeah, this one and another one that I'm sure I'll talk about in a later year, its sequel, are just truly excellent games. If you can find them somehow to play, definitely recommend it. And I have him on the PlayStation 3. But they're a bit choppy though, and I mean the frame rate really struggles in these games. So if I could get these games just, you know, cleaned up with high definition 60 frames per second, I would be so happy. I fucking love these games. They're so well done, and again, as a Transformers geek, I was all about it. Just, yeah, I can't say enough good things about this game. Just try to play it somehow if you can. If you are a big fan of the Transformers, you won't find a better video games for me, in my opinion, right, than these games here. I think they're really excellent. But now let's get into kind of the big dogs, though, for the multi-platform games that came out this year. So starting off with Call of Duty Black Ops. And so Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 were huge. And so they were coming out with a Call of Duty game each year, but then they started alternating, right, between Infinity War and then I believe Sledgehammer / Treyarch or something like that. And as of right now, Infinity War games were really being the popular ones with the Modern Warfare. But with this year, it was, I believe, the Treyarch one or Sledgehammer, one or the other. So their game came out, and it was Call of Duty Black Ops. And so Black Ops now started becoming a thing, and it started getting its own little fan following too, right, for a sub-series of the overall Call of Duty games. And this game here we're going back into the past. And so this game, I believe, is set around the time of the Vietnam War, give or take. And it has a cool story, though. This one has a really cool story, and probably among my more favorite stories in a Metal Gear I'm sorry, Metal Gear, Call of Duty game. I mean, I like the overall scope and epicness of the Modern Warfare ones more, but the story to it, though, right? I probably prefer the Black Ops, at least Black Ops, this first one, a little bit more. But either way, I mean, you still get a lot of great action set pieces. You know, don't get me wrong, right? There's still incredible moments in this game that are very action packed. You know, big explosions, set pieces, and you know the high stakes and all that, right? I mean, it's still like you're watching a blockbuster film at home. Um, but yeah, fun game. Had a cool trailer to it too. Also, that had an Eminem song, and I think that's kind of what lured me into this game originally. But overall, just another cool Black Ops, or I'm sorry, Call of Duty game. And like I said, the Black Ops games here, it's where it started, and still popular to this day, right? So maybe not as much anymore, but but yeah. So basically, the Modern Warfare and Black Ops games seem to be the more highly regarded Call of Duty games, and this was the first one from the Black Ops series, and yeah, good stuff. I mean, it's the good stuff on this. But let's see. So next up for multi-platform games is Final Fantasy 13. So we got away from Nintendo, and then we got away from Sony now, and now Xbox also has it too. So, well, I shouldn't say got away from PlayStation, but it came out on the Xbox as well. And so Final Fantasy 13, man, this game, I remember when they started showing screenshots and I was like, okay, there was something about it that I just was like, I don't know if this is going to be a good game or not. I mean, the game was stuck in developmental hell for a long time. And I mean, this game, I mean, you'll see it like towards the bottom of the list for Final Fantasy 13 games. It just, basically the game is very linear, right? And so it was also stuck in developmental hell for a while because there was this project that Square Enix was doing, where basically it was called a Fabulous Chrysalis Novus or something, where there was going to be like multiple games that were based around the same universe, right? Well, this particular Final Fantasy universe. And I mean, the game was delayed a lot, but finally they started showing what the final version was going to look like. So the character designs were still from Tetsuya Nomura, and so I mean, his character designs look pretty cool. It seemed like the main character was going to be this character Lightning, and she's pretty cool. I like her design and all, and her weapon, and she kind of seemed like a female version of Cloud. And so ultimately, in the end, her character was pretty cool. The other characters, they're cool too also, but not quite my favorite though, right? And when the game finally came out, it's very linear, which I mean, like Final Fantasy X is also very linear, right? But this one though, it doesn't have much exploration in it neither, because at the very least Final Fantasy X did have a bit of exploration, and it also had a very engaging story to it as well too, where this one here, I mean, the story, I don't know, it's the way it tells its story is kind of backwards, where you're kind of like, Final Fantasy X did it really well, where you're slowly learning about the world of Spira and as you're going on in your adventure. This game from the start just dumps you with a bunch of stuff, and they even have like a data log that you can go into, right, to learn a lot of like the different aspects of the game. That was a bit overwhelming at first, like you're talking about the Falsi, the IC, and the I don't even remember, right? I just remember being really lost with the story of it and all. And it just wasn't quite engaging. I mean, the graphics are incredible. I will say that. The graphics are really incredible. The music is really stunning too also. So again, I forgot who the composer is. It's not Nobuo Uematsu, but it was someone else. And I mean, the soundtrack is really great too also. And I will say that the battle system itself, actually, especially as you start getting further along in the game, is really fun and engaging. But it starts off a little slow, though. And again, you're just basically going down a corridor and attacking enemies. And while, yes, the battle system is fun, there's not a whole lot much more to it, like exploration or things like that. And so then it makes the game feel a bit of a chore to get through, honestly. I mean, really, it was the battle system, the graphics, and the music that kept me going, which is all good stuff. But when I play a Final Fantasy RPG or any RPG, really, you kind of want a bit of a story or a sense of adventure in it, right? And what's there for the story, it's a little odd. It's, again, some of the characters don't really land. Like, yeah, Lightning is cool. Saz is pretty cool. Snow is okay, I guess. And the other character, the female with the blue dress and the spear, she's kind of cool. But like Vanille and Hope, they're annoying. They just they're just. I mean, I guess the way their story plays out is kind of cool, but it's I don't know. They just kind of. I don't want to downplay this game too much because at the end of the day, I did beat it. I did like it, and I actually like the final boss and all. And I do think that the battle system is incredible in it, especially as you start getting further along in it. But it's just there's a lot of it though also that kind of like, yeah, there's a lot of stains in the toe as well too. So it is definitely amongst my worst favorite Final Fantasy games, but it's not that it's completely bad though, right? It's not like a bad game, the way something that can be made out to be. It's just it is a bit of a underwhelming game. I'll say that as far as the Final Fantasy games go. But if you like Final Fantasy, I would still say definitely check it out, especially if you like experimental battle systems in your JRPGs, and if you like Tetsuya Nomura's like art style and all, I think that you'll find a lot to appreciate about this game because it is a really nice looking game. And on this version here, the PlayStation was actually overall was a little bit better. The I think what it mainly came down to was that the graphics are more or less the same on both of them, maybe minute little differences here and there, but the PlayStation one came all on one disc because again it was a Blu-ray, where the Xbox 360 version came on I think 3 discs, and then also because it was on DVD and it's supposed to Blu-ray, the video compression was a lot better on the PlayStation 3 because it still uses some CG cinemas, and not quite as good on the Xbox 360, but still not bad on the Xbox 360, right? If that was your system of choice at the time. But not a bad game though. Still would recommend it. But for me, my favorite multi-plat game that came out this year was Red Dead Redemption. And this game I played on the PlayStation 3. My understanding that it runs slightly better on the 360, but either way, you can get a good experience on either one, at least from what was available back then. And Red Dead Redemption is just an amazing game. Let me think about it. Yes, I think it's my favorite game this year. And it's so it takes place here in the Wild West. I mean, it really is kind of like a Grand Theft Auto, only in the Wild West, but that's not a bad thing because that comes with a lot of cool things that you can do in the Wild West, like riding horses, training horses, going on bank robberies, and things like that, right? And it's the open world is just really immersive. The setting overall, right? It's there's a lot of browns, right, where it's just you're in this desert sort of area, so it's not the most varied game as far as its locations go, but it still fits the setting very well though, and the characters on it are just highly memorable. John Marston is definitely one of the best protagonists out there. Just his overall story, that's of how it starts off and all, is really immersive. You really feel for the character as he's a very flawed character, but definitely someone that you want to try to help I'll just say accomplish his mission. He has a bit of a past, I'll say that much. And yeah, just a great overall experience. I mean, one of the best endings of all time in the game. Just, it's a long one too. You're going to be here for a while, but just definitely a very impressive cinematic open world game. That's for me amongst the best. Probably, yeah, I would say my favorite game from Rockstar overall. And just, there's a lot of good things I could say about this game. And it's been a while since I played it, but I really got immersed into this game when I first played it. And I mean, there's 2 particular moments that really stand out. And I'll just say that. So the game's soundtrack is sort of like more of an atmospheric sort of Western spaghetti sounding soundtrack that they did a really good job in. But there's 2 moments though, where there's like this licensed song that comes out and plays. And then those 2 particular moments, I was just really stunned by just the overall drama going on in the story. I'll leave it at that. And yeah, definitely one of the better games of this generation. My favorite game of this year, and just an incredible time with this game. But let's get into some exclusives though. So each system has some exclusives this year. And so starting on the Xbox 360, so this exclusive here was an indie game. And so a lot of these games eventually went out to different systems, but at the time there was an exclusive. And so this game is for Limbo. And this was one of the other indie games that I got into at this time. And Limbo, it's kind of like one of those cinematic platformers. It's not a lot of action in it. It's all basically like you're solving puzzles, doing some platforming, but it has a very unique art style where It almost has like this film noir look to it, and it's like your characters all like shades of, it's just all black, and then the backgrounds are like shades of gray and charcoal and black and white, and so it's very moody, right? Not a very subtle music in the background, kind of has a really creepy ambiance to it, but the puzzles are really well done, the controls are really well done, and it's just a very immersive game also. And I remember when I first played this, it was one of the games that really started teaching me like, hey, indie games can be cool, right? Like, don't skimp on these. These can actually be really fun. And yeah, a really great game. Again, it got ported over to a lot of different systems afterwards, but at the time it was exclusive on the 360, and definitely started giving indie games, I believe, some spotlight on, right? Which well deserved, because there was a lot of cool stuff that was starting to come out. And I feel like this game was one of those games that started popularizing that, the indie scene, and for good, right? Because the developers were doing some pretty cool stuff there, where you got your big budget games, right, that were coming out on the 360 and the PS3, and to an extent the Wii. But then you had like these retro games too, also retro feeling games that were definitely worth a look. But another game that came out on the 360, and so again, the 360 wasn't really known for having exclusives, but this was for Alan Wake. And so this game, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's survival horror. It's more like an action game with horror elements to it, or supernatural elements to it, I'll say. And it kind of plays out like, I used to read a lot of Stephen King books. So if you've read Stephen King books, then I think you kind of know what I'm talking about, but it has a feel to it, right? Where, I mean, it has cool characters and all, but it has like a small town sort of like spookiness to it in a sense, because in the game you're going out to a kind of a small town in the Northwest where you're a writer and you're trying to get away from some stuff. And so you go out to this, the small town in the Pacific Northwest, but then eventually you get involved in this plot that involves like supernatural elements to it and all. And it's cool because as you're playing the game, you find these pages that are scattered about. And as you're reading these pages, it's almost like it's telling you the story of what you're going through, which I thought was pretty cool. And the game is done sort of like in this episodic nature where you complete a section and it's like it says, I think like chapter 1 ended or something like that. And, kind of like if you've ever seen the show Twin Peaks also. So think Stephen King meets Twin Peaks, and that's sort of the style that you get with this game. And so that's a good combination there, I feel, and a good story to it. The gameplay is pretty fun in it. It kind of plays a little bit like Max Payne. And so it has this cool mechanic where you use your flashlight to stun your enemies and then you shoot them. But you have to weaken them with your flashlight to a certain extent so that your gunshots actually are more effective. And so you have to kind of balance that out, right, to make you more effective in the game. And has like a cool dodging mechanic in it that overall, like I said, it has like the slow-mo effect and all, which is not quite like Max Payne, but kind of. And yeah, just overall cool game and definitely worthwhile playing. Again, this is a game that now it got ported to everything else, but at the time it was exclusive to the 360. So if you like what I just described right there, if that sounds appealing to you, this is definitely a game that I would suggest playing. And I mean, its sequel has come out now and all, right? I know, but again, if you're not familiar with the Alan Wake games, I would recommend starting here, as it's a pretty fun game. Excuse me. We also got Fable 3, and so another game in this series that is pretty popular on the Xbox, and at the time it was exclusive, but I don't know much about this one. I never played it, so I guess I don't know much about this one, like if it was well received or not. I know 1 and 2 were, but part 3, I don't know a whole lot about it, so I can't say, like I said, right to the quality of it. And but we got another, as the kids say, banger this year, and that was for Mass Effect 2. And if it wasn't because of Red Dead Redemption, this would be my favorite game of the year. Mass Effect 2 is an incredible follow-up to the first one of the best sequels of all time, and it was exclusive to the 360 up to this point. Next year is where it ended up. The PlayStation 3 finally got Mass Effect, and what they did was that they bundled it all. Wait, was it next year? I forgot, because I know that the PlayStation 3 didn't get it right away. It got it like, no, because I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I want to say that the PlayStation 3 versions didn't come out until Mass Effect 3 came out, because then it got them all in a bundle deal, right? Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I just know that it wasn't on the PlayStation 3 at this time. And so we got it. It was exclusive on this. And yeah, Mass Effect 2 is incredible. It takes pretty much the same structure of the first one. So it's like an action RPG, but now it focuses more on the action part of it. And it feels like a pretty good cover-based shooter along the lines of something like Gears of War or Uncharted. Like pretty solid gunplay mechanics, it streamlined the RPG mechanics more. So if you're wanting a game like this that has more RPG elements to it, you might be a bit disappointed. But if you like the style of the first one, and now with much more polished action gameplay, then I think you really appreciate this one. And just everything about this game just feels a lot more polished than the first one. And what I like about it too, also with the story structure to it, because because being the middle game in the story, because it was already planned to be a trilogy, right? So this is like kind of think like Empire Strikes Back, right, for Star Wars. It's kind of cool what they were able to flesh out the story, right, where it ups up the stakes on it, but you also don't have to do a whole lot of development because you already did that in the first one. And so this one here, the plot is basically where you're sort of on a suicide mission, right, to find out what the collectors are. And, and there's also the elusive man that's involved in it, and the whole mystery and all that around that is really excellent. And so the whole game kind of takes place where you're building up a team to go on the suicide mission. But as you're building up a team, you can also explore those characters more in their own little stories. And so because of that, I think it has like a cool overall plot, right? That again, you're going on the suicide mission, but because it allows you to really explore the characters more and all in their own missions and all, I think it gave a good combination of having a cool plot, but cool characterization in it. And so the game just moves at a really great pace. It's, all the way through, it just felt really well structured, really well paced. Felt refreshing each time. Each planet that you go to and each character that you meet has a very unique, interesting story to it. The gunplay, like I said, it was really almost on par with some of the best like 3D shooters at the time. And so all of that right there just made it truly excellent. And then the fact on how the story was carrying over from the first one, like the decisions you made on that one, if you have a save file, how they carried it over to the second one was truly incredible. And I was like, oh my God, they're really going to do this. They're really going to do this incredible fleshed out story where you're making the decisions, a lot of it along the way, and these decisions are having a big impact. And I was like really outstanded by how ambitious that was. And yeah, and some really cool characters and character designs and all. And so again, Mass Effect sort of has a style of like Star Wars meets Star Trek meets Battlestar Galactica, something like that, right? But just really well done. And yeah, this one is absolutely amazing. I really like this game and definitely did what a sequel should do, right? Improve of everything on the first one. Again, right? Minus some of the RPG elements to it and all. But other than that, though, incredible game. And yeah, I kind of want to go back and play the Mass Effect games now. They're so damn good. But this one definitely the kind of the crowning jewel in the series here. Not that part 1 and 3 are bad, and we'll get more into part 3 later. But this one here, though, right, is definitely the best one, though. But I still recommend playing them all because they are sort of all part of one story, though, right? But the cool thing, though, is that if you really don't want to play part 1, you're short on time, but you know that part 2 is the best one. It does have like this option where you can play out like the events of the first story in this sort of like I think it was like in a comic book style, and I think that the drawings and the writing and all were done by Dark Horse Comic, I believe. So that's kind of cool, at least. And then at certain parts, as you're going through the story, it allows you to make certain choices that you would make in the first one, right? Not all the choices, but some of the major event ones. And it's a bit bare bones in that, but at least kind of gets you up to speed on what happened in the first one, if you just don't want to play that one for some reason. But I'd still highly recommend playing all 3 of them. That way you get the full overall experience. But probably one of the best, or the most, I guess, Mass Effect 2 was incredible, right? But probably one of the more better, I guess, exclusives that came out on the 360 at this time was Halo Reach. We got another Halo game, and this one was still done by Bungie. And this was the last game that Bungie would do, as eventually the series would go on to another company, and we'll get more into that in the later years. But Halo Reach is incredible. And I personally, this is my favorite Halo game on the 360. Just right behind Halo 2 on the original Xbox. I like Halo 2 a slight more, but I really like this one, though. And you don't play as Master Chief, but the story to that is really cool. Kind of the same as in Mass Effect, where you're on this mission, I'll say, right? That it's kind of like almost feels like a suicide mission, and you're controlling these six character, or I should say, I'm sorry, you control this you character, Noble. What is his name? Shit, I forgot. No, the team that you play for is Noble Team Six or something like that. I forgot what the new character's name is. But anyway, but the other characters in this, they're really well written and all, and you get to know them pretty well. And eventually, just the events that play out, and because basically Halo Reach is the events that take place right before the first Halo game. And so if you know anything about that game, you kind of already know that this game's not going to end well. And I'll just leave it at that, right? But just, I really enjoyed this one. I mean, the shooting mechanics and all are really well done. Some of the settings in this are really awe-inspiring, and some of the best like sci-fi graphical backdrops that I've ever seen in a video game, or really anything. It's truly outstanding. And the way that the cinematics are filmed and all is actually really, well, cinematic and really well choreographed and everything. And yeah, I really enjoyed this game. Excellent music as well too. I mean, the Halo games have already had really cool music. This one really stands out as well. And like I said, this is an incredible Halo game. I really enjoyed it. Just slightly like Halo 2 more, but this one is right behind it. And I think that for this being their last game that Bungie did for the Halo series, they went out with a bang. I think it's that great. It's truly a good time. But let's hop over to the Wii. And so some of the standout games on the Wii here. So I'll just go over a few of them here, as some of the other ones that came out I'm not too familiar with. But there was one game. So for me, the Wii is mainly worth getting because of the Nintendo games. But there was a few third-party games though that were worth playing. And for me, probably the better one is Sin and Punishment Star Successor. So going way back to the Nintendo 64, I don't know if I talked about it, and I think it would have been around year 2000, but there was a game that Treasure came out with, and it was only in Japan, and it's sort of like this on-rails shooter where you play like these two characters, and you're running and just kind of moving a cursor, right, and all to attack certain enemies. Well, this is its sequel, and it kind of plays the same, only now with the Wiimote, you're moving the cursor with the Wiimote, right? And so it feels very fluid. It's really fun to control and has some really cool action to it. Runs at 60 frames per second, so about as good as the looking of a game got on the Wii. And character designs aside, because the character designs look they're pretty horrific, but it's a really fun game, and definitely one of the better games you're going to find on the Wii, right? As far as like action games go, and would highly recommend it if you want something different to play on the Wii that takes advantage of what the controller could do, but it's not just a Nintendo game. Really recommend this game. It's a lot of fun. And I know that, well, I mean, the Wii shop is closed now. I know you could buy it on the Wii shop. I'm sorry, on the Wii U shop, to be backwards compatible with the Wii, but they closed that store down, right? So I don't think you can get it that way now. I mean, there's other ways of getting it, of course, but if you can get your hands on it somehow, highly recommend it. It's a really fun game. But a bit of a disappointing game, though, that we did get this year, it was Metroid Other M. And so this game, I believe, as far as the timeline goes, it takes place right after the events of Super Metroid. And so it seems like they wanted to give Samus a bit of a backstory. And that didn't really work out for them that well, though, as the game was developed by Team Ninja. So they're the team that did like the Ninja Gaiden games. And so the game tries to have like the stylish action to it in parts, and it kind of plays like a bit of a 3D shooter, but also like the levels and everything are a bit constricted and all that, right? So it almost feels like a 2D game in some sense, but it tries to combine elements of the Prime games where you can, if you turn your Wiimote up, because you're playing it with the Wiimote sideways, but then if you turn it up, you can use the sensor, and then it goes into this first person view where I think you're stationary, but you can use it to like log on to certain enemies or scan the area that you can use, I believe, in some puzzle elements. But none of it is, I mean, the action is not bad in it, but the rest of it is not just the best done. And the story is a little lame to it, where they really nerfed Samus, as she feels a bit of a weakling in this one, where, we've always liked Samus to be a bit stoic, right? And I mean, that's how she's truly a badass in this series. But this one, they made her seem a little bit weak. And so then along with the somewhat ho-hum gameplay, it just wasn't a very well-received Metroid game. I mean, the cinematics that plays out at first is kind of cool. I mean, it's really detailed, but I don't know. I don't feel that they did justice to the Samus character if they were going to try to flesh her out more. Excuse me. And so ultimately, the game just wasn't very well received. And I mean, I'm not going to say it's a completely horrible game. So kind of like with Final Fantasy 13, it's not horrible. It's just a letdown from what we know what this series has been, right? So because of that, it was a bit of a bummer. But if you're completely into Metroid and you want to absolutely explore everything that this series has, I mean, there's worse games you can play out there, and I'll leave it at that, right? But definitely not amongst the best, though, for Metroid, which is a bit of a bummer, right? Because, I mean, we had Metroid Prime Corruption 3 years ago, which was pretty cool. But after this, though, you would kind of start entering sort of a dark era for Metroid games. So we're not going to hear too much about this series, at least anything really worthwhile, right, for a while. So just kind of be prepared for that. And which was a bit of a bummer, just, excuse me, because I was a big Metroid fan and I was let down by this game, but because I didn't quite beat it, but I got quite far into it, and I just remember it was one of those games that was like, it felt like a chore to play through, right? And after like about, I don't know, I would say I got it 3/4 into the game, and I was like, I'm done. I was like, I'm just not feeling this game, but Metroid Other M, is what it is. But we got a good platformer though, and so this one was actually done by Retro Studios. So, if you were asking, well, why didn't Retro Studios do the next Metroid game? Well, because they were doing Donkey Kong Country Returns. And so this is a 2D platformer that's kind of in the lines of like what the rare Donkey Kong Country games were doing on the Super Nintendo. Only now it's like a 2.5D platforming game with polygons and all. And so it runs really well at 60 frames per second. The platforming is excellent on it and just a joy to play. I mean, this game is really fun. Some of the best platforming action gaming out there, when it comes to just sheer straight up platforming, and great level designs, just overall a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, it's a great game. I mean, it got re-released on the Wii, or I'm sorry, on the Switch recently. And it made very subtle uses of the Wiimote. That was the thing with the Wii. It's like some of the best games on it were games where you didn't necessarily really have to use the Wii, or the mechanics weren't heavily implemented on it. So then it kind of makes a argument of then what was the purpose of doing the motion controls, right? But anyways, yeah, it's pretty good. It's a really fun platforming game that again has had modern re-releases or on it. So, but yeah, this is where it first originated on. But the crowning jewel, though, for the Nintendo Wii this year, I would say, was Super Mario Galaxy 2. And I haven't really played much of this game here yet, but a little bit that I have messed around with it. And if it's anything like the first Super Mario Galaxy game, then yes, it's truly an excellent game. And actually, this game does use some somewhat clever usage of the Wiimote, where now you can play as Yoshi. And so this game, I believe, was originally considered to be sort of like a DLC to the first Super Mario Galaxy, but then they fleshed it out to its own game. And so with the inclusion of Yoshi, it makes pretty good use of the Wiimote, where if you draw I think a circle around certain things, it'll stick out its tongue that it latch onto it so you can swing across certain things. And I mean, it's the platforming though is excellent. Just an overall fun game. Again, I'm not too familiar with this one here, and from what I've seen, it kind of seems like people are split onto which one's better, this one or or the first Super Mario Galaxy one. But either way, you're getting two excellent platforming games, and you can't go wrong with either one of them. So they're definitely some of the most top tier straight up gameplay games. I mean, it was the reason why this game was the highest rated game of the year, right? It's just a lot of fun. And for the Nintendo Wii, really colorful graphics and 60 frames per second. So it was a bit of a looker, right, on the system that was otherwise pretty underpowered, right, compared to the other systems. And yeah, I mean, it's if you have you can get the remasters now of it, right? But but it is fun to play though on the Wiimote. This and Super Mario Galaxy. So one of the few games that I felt that the usage of the Wiimote, not completely necessary, I would say, but also kind of fun to use too as well. But just the game itself is really incredible though. Definitely one of Mario's better games. But going on to the PlayStation 3, so we had some exclusives that came out on the system, at least at the time. So I haven't really got into the Yakuza series, and it's just a series that I'm not too familiar with, but we got Yakuza 3 on the PlayStation 3. These games are sort of like this action-adventure games where you're a bit open world, where you're going through a city in Japan, and you work for the Yakuza, or you're taking on the Yakuza, something like that. And it's got beat-em-up elements with almost like certain life simulation elements from what it looks like. I mean, you can do like karaoke and things like that. So sort of like what Shenmue was doing, but more action-oriented though than Shenmue, from my understanding. And this is a series that I really want to get into. I played part one a bit, and I've liked it. I just need to really sit down and play it. And there's so many games now in the series, and they're pretty long too. So almost feels a little intimidating trying to get into it now. But definitely something that has my interest. But then we got Heavy Rain, which was a very story heavy focus game. So this game was developed by this developer called Quantic Dreams. And so I think they had done some games before this, and then the games that came out since after this, they're very story intensive, where they're sort of like uh the way that they use QTE in it, like quick time events, is actually pretty clever. And that makes the game feel a little bit more engaging, right? Than say like your typical walking simulator. But it is still QTE though, right? But there's definitely clever moments, and ultimately the game sort of plays like a kind of like one of those 90s thriller movies. So like something like, or late 90s, early 2000s. So think like 7, 8 millimeter, Fallen Angel, the game, that kind of style, that kind of music, that kind of ambiance to it and all. And so you control characters in multiple different scenarios and perspectives, and then how their stories sort of mesh with each other, mesh with each other is kind of cool. And it's got a pretty cool mystery overall to it. The twist that it has in the game and all is pretty cool. And I mean, it has some pretty nerve-wracking scenes. There's this one scene with one particular character on where let's just say somebody's giving him instructions to do something to himself, that the way that whole scene plays out and all is pretty horrific. And I mean, for the most part, it's pretty well acted. The graphics were pretty incredible at the time. And I mean, the characters, they definitely were going for like lifelike. And I mean, it's the game is still held up pretty well, right, graphically. And again, the way you can do certain commands, right, to play the game, it's pretty immersive, and the story keeps you really hooked. The soundtrack to it and all very reminiscent of like a lot of those 90s thriller classic movies. And so if you like that kind of style of storytelling and all, I think that there's a lot about this game that you'll really love, and definitely keeps you hooked. And because the way you do certain scenarios, it can lead to like different endings, right? So it gives it some replayability value to it. So yeah, so again, if you're into story-based games, this is definitely among one of the better ones on the PlayStation 3. But we finally got a Gran Turismo game in Gran Turismo 5. And I think I played this one back then. I don't remember a whole lot about it, just other than that it was just another Gran Turismo game. It took a while to come out, right? Because, again, the last one, Gran Turismo 4, had to come out in 2004. So that was almost like, 6 years until we got a new one. And this is where that Forza Motorsport was series for the Xbox was filling in that gap there, right? So I wonder how many like racing simulation fans jumped over to the Xbox just because of that, right? There was just a long wait for a new Gran Turismo game to come out on the PlayStation. But for me, probably the best exclusive though that the PlayStation 3 had this time was God of War 3. And so this one picks up right where the second one left off. And so without spoiling anything, I mean, I would definitely say play part 1 and 2, because this one picks up literally right where the other one dropped off. And I mean, God of War 3, so it's still more of the same gameplay, where it's a hack and slash game. It's, you got kind of like these kind of like fixed camera angles, kind of, and all. And so it's not over the shoulder like the way the new ones are. You get this crazy action going on. And, for me personally, these are the God of War games that I like the most. The opening to this game is the most incredible, epic, bombastic, like opening of all time in a video game. I mean, holy shit, what you're doing at the first start of this game. And I remember, so this game here, I have a bit of a memory to it, where I'd never been one to go to midnight launches and all, but at the time I was living in the city with my brother, and we were really looking forward to this game. And I mean, the graphics were just looking outstanding, right? And now, because now we're on the PlayStation 3, and we've already talked about the previous God of War games, right? Where we were very epic, and, for the PlayStation 2 had really good graphics. But now we're on the PlayStation 3, more power, and I can't stress enough, like, the set piece moments in this game, specifically with, like, the intro, where, I mean, holy shit. I mean, even to this day when I've played it, I'm just so astounded of, like, the scope of it, right? I mean, I'll just say you're scaling Mount Olympus, right, with the help of some friends. And wow, I mean, it's really a way to open up a game, and the game is still good afterwards, right? It's just that it does kind of slow down a bit afterwards, right after that incredible, like roughly 30 minutes or so. And but then in between, though, right, there's still some other really cool moments in it. But just the overall gameplay, I mean, it's more of the same, right? The same kind of hack and slash gameplay that the previous ones had, where you're using your geez, what are they called? Your chain blades. And you get some other cool weapons in it. And this one is finishing up the trilogy of the story that they were telling with this Greek mythology. And so the way it ends and all, I think they did a really good job of that, because it ends in a really satisfying fashion, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, some of the, probably for me personally, probably like the coolest just straight action gameplay out there, and just overall game. Because again, it plays really well. The action is intense. The graphics are really incredible. The music is really great, and a great finale right to an amazing trilogy. And yeah, just an amazing time with this game. Like I said, play part 1 and 2 first would be my advice before you get into this one. And just get ready to be astounded by the intro if you've never played it before. But what I remember though is that, so we went into our midnight launch of this game, and ultimately there wasn't that many people there, but you know, it was still kind of cool, right, to hang out at the time, right, and on wait for this game. But also leading up to the release of this game, there was some heavy metal bands that they did an album for this game where the music wasn't in the game, but it was like inspired from the game. And so if you like groups like Trivium and I forgot some of the other groups, but I think maybe Lamb of God, I'm not sure. But if you like that kind of heavy metal, try to find the soundtrack to it. The song that I remember the most is from Trivium, The Skies Above, I think is what it's called. Just really awesome. And we were listening to that soundtrack for weeks before the game came out, right? Getting ourselves hyped up for it. And so that was just a really fun time, because I remember we went to the midnight launch, got the game, went back home really late, and we played through like at least the first 30 minutes of it, right? Which is, again, that incredible intro that I'm talking about. We were just so blown away. And definitely one of the time that I've been the most impressed by a video game as far as like the technicality, the graphics and everything, right? It was just an amazing time. That game is awesome. I really like that game. But yeah, God of War 3, probably for me, my favorite exclusive game that came out on the PlayStation 3 during this time. But just wanted to finish up here a bit now, as this is Final Fantasy 14. So I just want to talk about it just because I'm a big fan of the series here. And because Final Fantasy 14 has a bit of a story to it as far as like the game overall. And so this game went through a lot of revisions and all, and it didn't start off well. And I was actually surprised, because I thought this game came out a little bit later, but no, it looks like it started in 2010. So let's just kind of go over this a little bit here, right? As yeah, it has a bit of a history here. Now, I'm not familiar with the game itself. Like I said, I don't play these online games. But basically, Final Fantasy XIV was a 2010 massively multiplayer online role-playing game for Windows, developed and published by Square Enix. It was the original version of the 14th entry in the main Final Fantasy series, and the second MMORPG in the series after Final Fantasy XI. Set in the fantasy realm of Isoria, players control a customized avatar as they explore the lands and are caught up in both an invasion by the hostile Garlean Empire and the threat of the Primals, the deities of the land, Beastmen tribes. Eventually, they are embroiled in a plot by Garlean Legatus to destroy the Primals by bringing one of the planet's moons down on Isoria. Oh, that sounds intense. So Final Fantasy XIV has been in development since 2005 under the codename Rapture, and was announced in 2009 for Windows and the PlayStation 3 video game console. It ran on Square Enix's Crystal Tools middleware engine, which is also what the Final Fantasy XIII ran on. During development, the team carried over multiple aesthetics elements from Final Fantasy XI while attempting to create something that stood on its own. Excuse me. Due to several factors, the development was beset by problems that would later have drastic effects on the game. Attempts to bring the game to Xbox 360 consoles fell through due to disagreements with Microsoft about the use of Xbox Live. After its alpha test and delayed beta test, the game went live on September 30th of 2010, remaining active until its servers were closed on November 11th, 2012. At launch, the game was met with negative response. While the graphics and music were praised, the other aspects were unanimously panned, including the gameplay, interface, and general impression of the game being unfinished. Critic and fan backlash caused Square Enix to suspend subscription fees, indefinitely postpone the PlayStation 3 version, and replace the development team with Naoki Yoshida, brought in as producer and director. Yoshida decided to make marginal improvements before the game shut down, ultimately replacing it with with a new version initially subtitled A Realm Reborn, which met with favorable reception upon its release. So yeah, long story short, right? So the game, like I said, right, it was developed started in 2005, came out in 2010, and I remember when it came out, the game was just panned really bad. I was like, what is this, right? It was just completely broken. People didn't like it, and so the game just kind of fizzled out, right? But eventually, they brought in let's see, what was his name again? Naoki Yoshida, and so he pretty much may improve the game a lot, right? And Final Fantasy XIV right now is still one of the biggest MMORPGs out there to this day, and it was a lot of like the work that him and his team did, right, and all to get it back up to speed. Where again, it was called A Realm Reborn. Like I said, I don't know the full story of it. I just know that they changed a lot of different aspects to it and all to just bring it more up to par with what fans were expecting. So he's also known as Yoshi P, and so he's also done Final Fantasy 16 more recently. But yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy 14, A Realm Reborn, incredibly popular, still going to this day, and so it's pretty amazing on how he was able to turn that game around. Because again, initially the game just was a complete flop. So for me, it seems like it's one of the better comeback stories that the video game industry has ever had. And I wish I could provide more specifics on it, just because, I can read here stuff and all, but I just don't have a whole lot of firsthand experience with it, as I just don't play these games. But I think that's cool, though, that how they were able to fix this game. And like I said, it's still beloved to this day. But I'm going to end it here for 2010. Definitely a lot of great stuff that happened in the video game industry here. And we will be back next year where we start looking at 2011. And as we get into 2011, we're starting to get a little bit of rumblings on what's going to be going on with the next generation, as now we will be looking at games like, let's see, what came out in 2011? There's kind of the stretch here as we're going into the next few years. I mean, I'm familiar with them and all, but we started kind of entering a bit of a, I wouldn't say dark era of games, but I would say that for me, the golden years of gaming, I mean, I don't want to exclude 2013 because we had like two incredible games that came out that year. But for me, really, it was like going forward from here. Not that there wasn't any great games, there was. It's just that I feel like the game industry started shifting some. And so some of the stuff starts getting a little bit more fuzzy, right, as far as my overall recollection of everything. But I do know that there was, one particular action or RPG open world medieval game that came out that was incredibly popular. There'll also be a certain puzzle game that involves portals in it that was really cool. And also a certain subgenre was born called Souls-like. And as well, something as well that came out was also a new portable console. And so we'll look into all that next week. Hopefully I should have that up by Sunday of next week. But until then, hope you at least enjoyed this one, gave you a bit of insight on what happened in 2010, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.